Okay, I'm good.
Is it winds up on there, huh? How did that happen? So long as
Yeah.
we can get.
Calling to meeting call to order the meeting of the Cohasset Board of Selectmen Tuesday, June 27, 2017. Roll call, please.
Kevin McCarthy here.
Diane Kennedy here.
Paul Schubert here.
Jack Niley here, Steve Gomer over here.
Those who wish to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, come to do so. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just the public comment, items that are not on the agenda, is there in the public who wishes to comment on anything not on the agenda? Please.
My name is Wayne Sawchuk. I live at 432 Beechwood Street, and I own the Samuel Bates House in Cohasset Village. And we have had since our ownership, for the last 12 years, two short-term rental apartments on the second floor, and it's in a business area. And this year, for the first time, the rates for a beach sticker, we're unable to get a seasonal beach sticker like the hotels because remember, they pay a hotel tax and we're not covered by that. But the cost for us to buy a permit for the beach for a resident coming for a weekend or a week has now been set at $100. So today, for example, I got a permit for someone that's staying from July 1st to the 5th. It cost me $100 for the temporary pass. And I believe that should be adjusted to be $50 to reflect what it is over 90 days, which is what it is, or for regular residents, the same $50. So I'd just like your consideration that this less than 60-day permit shouldn't necessarily cost $100 when the only other permits that are $100 are the permanent ones, of which you pay one fee for the entire summer and it's transferable. So I feel like I'm in a catch-22. We've always had a transferable one. We're willing to pay the 50, but 100 seems excessive for the people coming in to stay. Thank you.
Chris, can you put that on the next agenda? Let's see if we can come up with a...
There's never been, I mean, there were never any official rules, so
Right.
what was happening was just a combination. So there are, we can talk about it more at the next meeting.
So we'll talk about it, Wayne.
Yeah, I think
It's
we're
not
bringing it up
unreasonable, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we've gone through kind of the first iteration, and this is where it starts to show up where these outliers that
Trapdoors.
have been, I wouldn't say grandfathered in, but have been extant for a while.
We
show
understand,
up.
I understand the taxes and all the
Sure.
other parts of it, so just and I also know all about the bed and breakfast and the what?
Airbnb.
Was it?
Airbnb.
Airbnb, which is a problem which we don't subscribe to. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Any other public comments? Okay. Next up is license permits and events at the 100th anniversary of the Sandy Beach Association event. And is there anyone from you? Just identify yourself and just a brief.
Annette Sawchuk, and I'm treasurer of Sandy Beach Association.
You two know each other?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Do you know each other?
I'm sorry.
Do you know each other?
She's the better half.
That goes without saying.
So we are here for, excuse me, an event permit. We would like to do fireworks. It's going to be July 22nd, it's a Saturday. We would like to do fireworks. The fireworks will go off at 9 o'clock. They will be they're gonna be 22 minutes long. So sometimes they don't go off at exactly 9 o'clock. So we figured if we start at 9, they would definitely be, if we didn't start at 9, they would definitely be over by 10. Also in that event permit is for a clam bake at Sandy Beach. And we've done it, and well, Sandy Beach has not done it. I've been involved with it. We've done it 3 times for the Historical Society. We get a 1-day liquor permit. We have a full caterer. She comes in, she handles all of the food. She gets the 1-day liquor license. She has all the insurance. And we have not ever done an event permit for that because it's on private property. There's not a parking issue because we do it in September. But doing it in conjunction with the fireworks, it could be a parking issue. What we would like to do, and I was waiting to come before you, is get permission from the school committee to use the high school parking lot. There are about 325 spaces there, and we would run a shuttle bus from the high school to the beach for, once the parking has been filled, and we would run the shuttle buses.
Chris, have there ever been any fireworks as a public display?
In this town?
Yeah.
Not any time that I'm aware, not in recent history.
Last time it was fireworks in this town was put on privately by Peter Roy.
Chief, any,
So the
background?
history on the fireworks as far as displays, Mr. Roy put on 2 different displays, one at the harbor, on or about the turn of the century. And there was one a couple of years after that off of a barge off of Jerusalem Road. Both of them were private. And, yeah, again, the fireworks display itself has to be permitted by the state fire marshal through the codes. We have, they've gone through all the things that they need to go through to get that permitting done. We have the permit in hand. The fireworks company is one that's been doing the same fireworks for the town of Hull, I believe, for the last 15 years when they have their carnival down there and fireworks. So they will do exactly the same type of operation that they do for Hull. The fireworks will actually be loaded on the barge down at the Pemberton Pier, down at the end of Hull, and then brought around to here. So obviously, that's the part you worry about, as far as everything being trucked down and then put on the barge. Once the barge is here, there is a perimeter that has to be set, because it is dependent upon the size of the shell, and that's been set. And the fire marshal's office has permitted this with the natural barriers, as they like to say. So because it's in the water, as long as it's 450 feet, there's nothing within 450 feet of it, there isn't a problem. So we have received the permits, we've received the application, and it has been permitted at this time, with stipulations, obviously, for safety.
How are we gonna handle, is the harbor master, how are we gonna handle the water and the, you know, they're gonna be, I'm sure there are gonna be boats out there watching the fireworks,
Well,
right?
the good news is that the way it's been proposed, the barge will sit inside of Westerly Round Rock, between Westerly Round Rock and the beach. So the natural picket fence of Brush Island, Westerly Round, and Black Ledges will kind of keep everybody outside of that. And that is where, well, that's where the harbor master is responsible for making sure that everybody stays off of that, that's all.
So low water on that day is 4:30 in the afternoon, which essentially means that so long as there's decent weather, the spit's gonna be loaded with boats.
More than likely.
The natural progression is going to be to sit right in the middle of Westerly Channel. Because that's what's beyond
Correct.
Westerly Round, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna be right in the middle of the channel, unless you're keeping a perimeter off of that.
Well,
And it's logical to expect anywhere from 50 to 200 boats.
we'd have to, again, I do not have the photo with me right here, I gave it to, did I give that to you this afternoon, Chris? It's in your packet?
Yeah, it's pretty
There's
extensive.
a picture in your packet of what the 450-foot radius looks like.
Right.
So as long as they're outside of that radius, that's what we have to control.
Yeah, where I'm going with this, Chief, by the way, looks like it's gonna be a great display, and without a doubt, if it's a 22-minute?
22 minutes.
22-minute operation with 4, 5, and 6-inch shells, it'll be magnificent. That's about what Hingham puts on, okay? And the only reason we're asking about this is not about you, but rather that the spectating crowd itself should be fairly big. Is everybody signed off on this, by the way?
Yes.
We,
Everybody has signed off? Because I see the chief shaking his head no.
I didn't sign off yet.
Okay.
And
What's the
and I
issue?
just wanna go back, you know, the point I was trying to make is, we've got 2 boats with the harbor master, and the harbor master's not even here. My guess is we will have over 100 boats. It sounds to me like we need a mutual aid call to Hull and Situate and Marshfield to have more people. You know, I know this water really well, and I can tell you, they're all gonna get in trouble here, especially at low tide, because it's all rock. And you're gonna get people that are drinking, and you're gonna get people that are all over the place, and you can't cover that with 2 boats. There's no way you can cover a crowd like that with 2 boats.
This,
can I say something?
Go ahead.
Sure.
We met this morning with the fire chief, and the chief, and Lori was there. She said there is a very good chance, and she will talk to, and she was gonna call the Coast Guard again today. They've been inundated because of 4th of July coming up and, Sail Boston, that the Coast Guard boat will be there. She also said that the fireworks that went off in Hull over the weekend, she said they don't get the spectator boats anymore. She said the Hull, harbor master was home asleep in bed.
Why would we
that
not
night.
make a mutual aid call to Situate, Hull, and
That,
Marshfield?
to be very honest, that is her call. She's the harbor master. If she needs help from either Hingham, Hull, or Situate, she will ask for it, and that was what she mentioned earlier today, as well as the Coast Guard.
We recognize that, and it's our job to make sure public safety is enforced.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, 2 boats, one of them being a skiff, and 200 pleasure boats, where the minimum scope required out there is gonna be 120 feet, 30 feet of water, right? I'm sorry, this is something that I think we're reasonably concerned about, having nothing to do, by the way. with
I mean, are you
proposed
upset that we're
entertainment.
challenging this, chief?
I'm upset that you're challenging the harbor master when she's not here, yes.
Well, I
And
think she should be
and
here.
With all due respect, Mr. Gomer, for you to throw public safety at me is insulting.
I did
Okay,
not throw
okay,
it.
wait a second,
Whoa,
wait a second.
back down, young man.
Back down.
Back down, young man. I'm not throwing public safety at anyone. I'm asking a question.
Mr. Chairman, I was asked the question, I'd like to finish the
Please
answer.
answer.
I believe that the harbor master planned to be here. Unfortunately, due to an emergency at the harbor, she is tied up. We've had this discussion. She knows what she's up against, and she's willing to get help if she needs it.
Fair enough. We're asking. I see another chief saying that he's not signed off on this yet. I think it's a fair question. No one's questioning
not
you or
unreasonable.
your integrity,
Wow.
okay? Do we understand each other? Affirmative or negative?
I'm not going to answer any more questions in regards
Thank
to
you,
that,
Steve.
all right?
The
I was
harbor
told
master's
not
not
to
here,
speak
so
to
it's a
that.
matter
So
I
I'm
am,
not
I
going
am,
to.
I am asking an
You were
open-ended
told not to
question.
speak to the to the harbor master aspect
No,
of
no,
this?
I was told to answer the question. I did.
I'm
He
asking,
believes it's, from his point of view, he has spoken to the harbor master, and the harbor master is well aware, although she's not here, due to
I understand,
a further public safety issue in the harbor.
I understand the fire chief's response. All right? I have sincere questions because for the last 20 years, I have taken my boat to Hingham to watch the fireworks display. I've taken it to Wessagusset to watch the fireworks display. These fireworks displays are almost identical to the one that's being proposed. To suggest that we can handle this on our own, or we can leave it to a last-minute decision, I think is foolish. By the way, having nothing to do with Sandy Beach's application.
If I
Go
may,
ahead.
so, we really do appreciate all the interaction with the Sandy Beach folks. It's coming kind of late in the game. It would have been helpful if we had been having these debate discussions a couple of months ago. We haven't, so here we are. So, we're going to do everything we can to get this accelerated. I have lots of prior experience with fireworks on the water as well, and you know, we, not having had this in town before, I one of the people who tend to err on the side of caution as well. So I will be talking to the harbor master, as I think you all know there was a problem down at the harbor earlier, about an hour ago, 2 hours ago, involving a seawall. So that's what she's down at. We do have to get answers to this. It's absolutely, and we have to make sure that we have enough coverage. Having the Coast Guard be super helpful, because that's what they do. It's a nice big boat, and people can all listen and see it. So I think it'd be really helpful if we can get the Coast Guard involved.
Why not the other harbor master?
No. I'm not saying not the other harbor masters. I'd love to have everyone lend a hand, because it's good for us to be able to interact like that and test ourselves, because if we're gonna do something in 3 years, I'd like to know
Right.
how it all works from my perspective.
For what it's worth, my experiences with other displays inside the confines of Boston Harbor are that the harbor masters respond. Occasionally, you'll even see something as far-fetched as Boston Police, DCR, the Coast Guard, Mutual Aid, and the auxiliary. And on Wessagusset, that's probably 350 boats, okay, pleasure boats, anchored around a main channel. This is not a main channel, but you get the idea. 100 boats
Oh, I know.
could cause a fair amount of ruckus, so,
And you need to keep the perimeter during the show. You just have to.
yes,
It's a lot.
absolutely.
And we haven't done it before, so I know, by the way, just to answer, Jack, absolutely, we should be partnering with the other communities. I don't think anyone said we're not. I think that because Lori was called away, it's just left a gap in the conversation, so, which is unfortunate. Clearly, I want to be just as comfortable as all of you that we're fully covered, and I'm happy to make any calls I need to my colleagues to make sure that we're covered. I don't think it should be an issue. I don't think there's anything else going on at that point.
No, and high tide is at 11 o'clock.
Yes, it is.
So, and the fireworks don't go off till 9, so it's not as low around those rocks.
No,
as
no,
it
no,
could
they-
be.
they-
But still,
the-
there are still submerged rocks all through there. You
Right.
just can't,
There's-
it looks like you can come, it's trickier than it looks, and if you got a lot of boaters out there who don't know what they're doing, you could end up in trouble, that's
There's a
all.
lot, there's a lot of
Oh,
rock.
we
And if you
don't-
had
we
two
don't-
boats taking care of them, you just,
No, no, no,
why
it's
would
cool.
we do that?
No,
I mean,
no,
it just
no.
doesn't make any sense.
No, I don't, I would never be comfortable with that either. So I don't think that's remotely what's gonna happen. Again, this is kind of coming together, and again, I also wanna hear Chief Quigley, because another concern that I share is people coming from the land.
Which is
Because-
a really big problem.
Because,
Potential.
Diana,
No, all I wanted to say was, we just got the actual details of the fireworks display, like now, or
Yes.
a couple hours ago. And the application and the agenda, even though it referenced fireworks, I think we should focus, at least tonight, get through the one-day liquor license, one-day entertainment license. And then I am curious to hear whatever additional information's been prepared for tonight, specific to the fireworks. But the other question I have is, what is our responsibility? Do we have to approve the fireworks? And under kind of what?
well, we don't permit them per se because they're in the sea, right? However,
It's our town.
I mean, it's our town, and I know that the folks at Sandy Beach want to partner and work with us because we don't want to have any trouble. They don't want to have any trouble any more than we do. And again, it's somewhat uncharted, I hate to use this term, sorry, it's uncharted waters, because we haven't done a fireworks show off the, anytime recently. We had a decade of experience in North Hempstead where we had a harbor, we had it down to a science where people went and how it worked. If we're gonna be able to pull this off in 3 years, I think we need to be able to understand what we're doing here. We're just on a very accelerated timetable, and it's a bit of a challenge, because, again, unfortunately, something happened tonight, right? So we don't have everybody at the table.
And my point really for tonight is, if we get through, if we vote on the one-day liquor license, vote on the entertainment license, we're not slowing anything down, but I certainly think that we all want to hear more information about.
So we're gonna come back, we have to come back in front of you in 2 weeks with all the loose ends tied up, because that's, the event's on the 22nd.
22nd.
Yeah. That's the right date, it's the 11th, right?
So, I mean, can I just ask a technical question? I mean, if we have fireworks off the beach, what's the town's liability for fireworks? Have we even talked to our insurance carrier?
Yes, so we've required that we be a named additional insurer
I
at all.
called for that.
Sandy Beach has its own policy.
And how big's the policy?
2 million.
The concern is a northeasterly breeze brings Sheldon Road into the picture.
If it's too much of a breeze, the Coast Guard won't let them go off. 20 miles an hour, there's no fireworks.
No, 20 is fine, but it doesn't matter. That close, Sheldon Road comes into the picture with a northeasterly breeze. And that's the reason I'm
Right.
asking about the coverage.
Yeah, and we do have to get, I think the fireworks company needs to cover us too.
They do.
Yeah, they have 12 million.
I have the insurance policy for that.
You do, okay.
Yeah.
So, one question though for Chief Quigley. Your reasons for withholding signature.
Right, good evening. I guess first, the good thing is we can do this. We can make it happen. It's just a matter of, the resources that we need to make it happen. And the reason you just got the packet was we had the meeting today at 10:30 this morning for about an hour. And, I just finished that. It's really just a thumbnail of the event, because that's all I have. So the reason I didn't sign off today, because we haven't nailed down even where the barge is going to be. There's one school of thought that wants to have it inside the rocks, and I went down and looked, and I'm a landlord, I don't know much about the water, but it looks to me, if we put it out further, which I don't even know if is possible, that if it's in close, people are gonna be craning their necks to watch the fireworks. They're going straight up. So it's gonna be an awkward angle. And we're gonna draw people into Sandy Beach, because the mere fact that it's in so close to the shore is gonna prevent people from seeing it from, say, Black Rock, and, you know, different parts of Sandy Cove and things like that. If we push it out a little bit further, we may spread out the crowd and, you know, draw people to Black Rock Beach, maybe even a Common or wherever. It may be a better location. I don't know. You know, you guys that are voters may know more.
Well, it brings a larger viewing area in.
Yeah, so we're trying to avoid gridlocking the area of Atlantic Ave and Sandy Beach. So my train of thought is if it's out a little bit further, if it's possible, I don't know, it sounds like there's a channel out there. If it's out a little bit further, there may be a wider viewing area. That would tend to lessen the crowd
The
at Sandy Beach.
Mark channel at that point is about 100 yards wide. And so beyond that marked channel is plenty of space, but it does bring in a broader viewing area. You could actually look at it from Bassing's Beach at that point and have a fairly clear view of it.
So that's, you know, maybe more desirable.
Well, again, ultimately, that's your collective decision along with the state fire marshal and the event sponsors.
And again, we'll get there, we just have to have, you know, a little bit more conversation about it. And I just wasn't comfortable signing off on a blank slate where there's no. Yeah, so,
Good work.
yeah.
All right, well, then why don't we, if we can we?
I have a question. Do we need to go back to the Coast Guard? The Coast Guard's the one who set where the barge is gonna go.
The state fire marshal is the one that set the
The state
location.
barge,
And it was based upon the natural barriers. In other words, being so far off the beach. So that's it. The way it works is for every 1-inch size shell, you need to have 75 feet of clearance. So with using I believe a 6-inch shell is what they have for a
It's the
largest shell.
largest.
That's where the 425-foot radius comes in. The thought process behind putting the barge inside of Westerly Round was just simply because now you have a natural perimeter that you can patrol between the corner of Brush Island and Westerly Round, from Westerly Round down to Black Ledge, and from Black Ledge down into Hagerty's Point. You know, that was the thought process. Now you have a natural designated area that you can keep people out of. And that's why that was the idea of inside a Westerly Round as opposed to outside, might make it simpler to patrol.
I just have one other quick question. It's just a discrepancy in the paperwork, which is on the proposal from the pyrotechnic company. It says August 11th. I don't know if that was a previous date being quoted.
No.
So,
It's,
you might want to make sure they show up the right day.
no, they know what it is, but thank you.
As far as road closings and things like that, we can handle that pretty easily. And we're talking about bringing in probably about 12 officers to accomplish this whole thing. And the only other concern, and it's been addressed by Sandy Beach, they've been great to work with, is the possibility of a one-day liquor license, where people would be banned and there'd be a detail officer there, and really segregate them away from the regular beachgoers.
And you can see on the map, I don't know if you got this map, it's an aerial view, and it shows where everything will be set up.
Chief, the other question, of course, is this, if you have visitors who are not part of the event itself showing up, is there enough of a police presence to enforce the no drinking on Sandy Beach?
We would.
Now, maybe enforce is a tough word.
Sandy Beach
Discourage.
is a tricky situation because it's a private beach. And so it's gonna have to be patrolled by Sandy Beach personnel.
I see,
If
okay.
they have a problem with someone, we would come and intervene.
Okay.
The
Right.
parking lot's a different story, that's covered under the bylaw. And that, you know, public drinking is illegal in the parking lot.
But it's not illegal to transport it across the parking lot?
If you're
of
of age,
age.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
But I mean, it's very doable, it's just a matter of how much resources,
Coordination,
you know, we have to bring in.
Got it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, we're gonna have this come back on the 11th, I think.
And then we have to.
Well, it's not on the agenda, so we can't really
The
address
fireworks
this
are
much
gonna have to
more.
come on the 11th.
Could we, when it does come back, could we make sure that someone makes it clear to us what role we're to be playing in this? In other words, do we have to, are we supposed to approve this, or whatever it is that's being asked of us that to be clear on the 11th.
So, as again, this is kind of new to me too. We haven't had a fireworks request come through before, so officially, what's the board is being asked to approve is the event, which again, I believe you're looking to close the parking lot.
We're not gonna
Oh, you're not gonna close the parking lot? Okay. All right, never mind. The one-day liquor license and the entertainment license, which is the entertainment license for the fireworks, or is it for
No,
music?
it's for the band.
This is the band, 5:14.
So the liquor license and the entertainment license, and the event itself, the clamming itself is actually very, as Ed had pointed out, very similar to events that have taken place there before. So I don't think there's anything particularly complicated about that. It's the post-event entertainment that adds to the dimensions, and we really haven't done this before. So while there's no official, that I found yet, an official place where either I or you sign off officially, it's necessary. I think we need to keep this, everyone, all of you, and then the public in general, updated as to where we are, what's going on.
Just one correction, the music, the entertainment will not be afterwards, it'll be probably running from 5 to 8. Which is good. The fireworks, that's
what I
right,
meant.
that's how they're
I
entertained.
meant the post-event
Yeah.
fireworks.
No,
That-
the band stops when the fireworks start, they're done.
So if you want to, I think even in a worst-case scenario, let's say, beautiful day, but it's windy, no fireworks, you're still going to do the clam bake, I assume, right? So the board can act on the clam bake piece. I think they're linked, but they're independent. I mean, if for whatever reason, any of the chiefs, the harbor master came back and said, this is unsafe, we don't know this is gonna work, at that point, then we'd say, hey, you can't do this. And we come back and let everybody know that it's not gonna happen. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but I'm saying we don't have a lot of time, so we gotta pal on it. We gotta stick pretty tightly to this, because there's not another meeting before, and I don't wanna be approving things at the last second either. I don't think that's it.
Well, to Chris's point, in the contract with the fireworks company, they do allow for some contingencies where they may not be able to
Shoot them off.
have the fireworks, so that's built in to the contract.
That's the Coast Guard. They will, if the winds are 20 miles an hour, they won't have it.
And I think one of the things that's also come out is that if somebody's doing something like this, which is going to have an impact off-site, visually, in this case, the drive, we really should know about it as far in advance as possible, because it gives us a lot more time to plan, particularly, for some of the road races that we can almost pull out the old plans, and I think they can do them in their sleeps, the chiefs and everyone, because they know what they're doing. This is, we haven't done before. It's good practice, but we haven't done it before, so it takes that much longer, appropriately so, to assess. So,
This is a good dry run for you for
Yeah.
a few years down the road.
we appreciate it.
For the 200s, we'll come back.
250. Oh, the 250, yours.
So the clam bake will be in the parking lot area,
No, it's not in the parking lot, it's on the beach.
on the beach.
It's on the beach. There's a, on the map, it says clam bake, and it runs from it's the ocean side of the bathhouse, comes up, goes from the parking lot, there's a square there, so that they can come and go. It says cater parking, they're not gonna park there, they'll be down against Atlantic Avenue, because those are handicap spaces there, so we wanna keep those clear.
And that's literally gonna be fenced off as almost like a little private party
Yeah, there'll be a
within
rope,
Greater
there'll be
Beach
a rope,
or something, yeah.
roped up. And we have we're gonna use Tyvek wristbands, so they can't be taken off and given to somebody else to say, come have a drink, or come have a lobster, or whatever, so.
As you said, just like the Historical Society clam
Yeah,
bake.
only we're doing Tyvek, so they can't take them
Yes.
off.
Oh, is that happening?
We'll weld them onto their wrists, they won't.
Yeah. Well, the ones that we use, the other ones, that's all not.
So I would ask for a motion to approve the 100th anniversary clam bake.
I make a motion that we approve the 100th anniversary Sandy Beach Association event clam bake
On July 22nd.
On
Second.
July 22nd.
on July 22nd, 2017.
Is there a second?
Question before we go there. Is this motion to include the one-day liquor license, or is that a separate item?
it's a separate item.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to approve the one-day liquor license associated with the 100th anniversary Sandy Beach Association event of the same date.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Might
opposed?
you amend that if there's a rain date? We have the 23rd. Do you want to put that into the motion so if it affects that, you might want that on the record?
Move to amend the previous motion to include a possible rain date of July 23rd, 2017.
Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
So
For
then-
the entertainment, is that?
We gotta do that too.
Can I,
Is that separate?
Entertainment separate.
I will move the entertainment license with the proviso that all public safety officers sign off to the satisfaction of the board.
So where is this again now?
But this is the entertainment license for the band during the clam bake. It's not for.
This is not all inclusive then?
No, no,
No.
no, no.
Fine.
they-
Then move that we, the board approve the one-day entertainment license for Sandy Beach 100th anniversary, July 22nd, 2017, with a rain date of July 23rd, 2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We don't have a fireworks permit per se.
Right.
And maybe,
No, no,
maybe we should think about
Good.
it, but,
No, actually, I think what I'm ending up referring to is the public safety plan and its full approval.
yeah, I want to get that in front of all of you. I want to see it completed. I want to be able to tell you when we sit here in 2 weeks that we're all good, at least from a planning perspective.
And that's why it's important that we understand and know exactly what our role is.
Right.
Are we to vote on this or not a vote, or, you know,
Yeah.
that's gonna be important.
Yeah, there really isn't a vote per se to take on it, to my knowledge at this point. If I discover something in the next 2 weeks, I'll let you know. But it does raise a question of again, these have not happened here. They happen in Hull pretty regularly, but we've never really done them here. We don't
No,
have a
you know,
display beach like Fantastic.
Does Hull have a fireworks permit through the,
I honestly, I don't
because
know.
my understanding, most of it goes to the state
Yeah, but
and Coast Guard.
the reality is that you're gonna have a land impact no matter what, right? You always have a land impact, particularly here. I mean,
Sure.
Hull is one thing. I mean, but you got up and they're designed to deal with web traffic, right? And Tesket Beach is designed to handle crowds. We are not designed to handle crowds.
You know,
Can I just ask the chief, do the other towns, as far as like Hull, which is probably the most common for fireworks, do they have a means of, like the selectmen approving or presenting something to for
To
authorization?
be very honest, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't answer that question. I spoke to the Hull Fire Chief today in regards to what they do, but he didn't bring that up, whether or not it was permitted through the board or not.
Right, because my understanding, it goes to the state and a fire marshal point of view.
The
and
state
local.
fire marshal, is the one that the permit goes into, and they're the ones that deem it safe or not.
Okay, and then
And
we
they
deal
put
with
the-
kind of land and sea
They
portion.
tie in all of the safety pieces,
Okay.
and as long as the professionals that are firing the fireworks have to live with all the rules and regulations. So it's regulated, and it comes in under the code, so.
Now, in this case, though, because this is going on, they're gonna have to get details. I mean, this is just, the town can't absorb the expense of regulating, of bringing in 12 officers to do the fireworks. I mean, that would be a nice subsidy. I mean, so you all understand that, right? So, in that case, this is a routine, those things never come to the selectmen. There's an event, you need a detail, the chief can exercise his requirements to do that. And the harbor master also has authority to require additional things for public safety as needed, so we're gonna test those.
Yeah, I mean, the scope of this is pretty big, right? I mean,
Choose
it's-
first, hold on.
Just two quick things. One is I have a couple friends on the Hull Selectmen. I will call them and
Okay.
let you all know what they do or what their issues are from their perspective. The other thing is a question for Chief Sylvia, which is, does the fire marshal actually come down, or is it?
A representative from the
locally?
fire marshal's office is available to us if we need him.
If
He's
we
already
need him.
been here with us, he's viewed the site.
But
He
once
knows
they
that-
approve it, it's not their practice to necessarily come down here and monitor.
Usually it then falls on the
Local.
local fire department and the fire prevention office. And, I'll mention that also Hingham's getting ready to go next Monday night. So I spoke with the Hingham fire chief, and I asked him the same question. So I have his plan for what they have to do in regards to how to make it safe. The town of Situate does fireworks every single summer during their festival or their carnival down there. So all of our surrounding communities are doing this. What we're trying to do is figure out what the best practices are so that we can make this as safe as possible. Obviously, that's our goal on top of everything else.
Ours is
I'll be very happy when the 22 minutes is over.
on the 22nd.
And I will mention the other thing, just so you're aware of it, the other thing that is required by the marshal's office of the shooter, the actual fireworks company, they have to do a first light search of the entire coastal area to make sure that there's no unexploded ordnance anywhere to be found. So that means they are going to be in everybody's backyards at daybreak. So that's just something for everybody to be aware of.
Wow.
One of the other things that I wasn't aware of until the chief let me know is that perimeter for the barge off of Sandy Beach has to be maintained as soon as that barge gets there. So if it's there at 10 a.m., that perimeter has to be held until 10 o'clock that night. So that makes for a
And Lori knows that.
What, that's generally a policing function, right?
the harbor master.
It's yeah, in the other communities, it's been the harbor master that is charged with making sure that any boat traffic stays outside of the perimeter that has been set. Obviously, the perimeter being set at 450 feet is fine, and you're just shooing people away until it's time to shoot. Then it becomes, very serious at that point. So hopefully at that point, you've already chased everybody out. Everybody knows what the rules are, and you're not gonna have anybody trying to sneak inside of it during the actual event. But obviously, that's what we're concerned with.
I'm not gonna beat it to death. I mean, I just, wanna point out the water is 53 degrees. That's pretty treacherous water out there. There's a lot of stuff that could happen, and that's my biggest concern about the event's great. 1,000 people is a lot of people. This is gonna be a lot of work, and I'm just really concerned about that water access, because there are only two ways to get in there, and both of them at night would be, I'm more worried about people leaving after the fireworks. That's really where I have my big concern, because it's gonna be dark, and people are gonna have been there a long time, and it's hard to get out of that area, even if you know what you're doing. You basically need some kind of electronics to get out of there. You can't do it by sight after dark.
You're talking from the water.
From the water.
From the water.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just a comment, the board might consider putting something in the Mariner about people staying out of that perimeter, kind of let the general public know that's off limits.
Okay.
I'm actually really surprised the Mariner's not here tonight, but I'm sure
Mariner is
she'll-
here.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're here from the Mariner? Excellent, all right then.
Yeah,
You
if
heard
that could
that?
go in the Mariner, it'd be great, just to inform the public, there's a set perimeter, which starts as soon as the barge arrives and until the barge probably leaves, I would think.
Well, I'm sure that Bill could do his usual great job of getting that information to them.
It should come from still.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll figure it all out.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
Hey, you got the Coast Guard put out a local notice to Mariners too, it'll tell you where security zones are, so the people can find out where they broadcast on 23A on VHF radio, so anybody that's out with a boat has a radio is gonna be well aware of the fact that there's a security zone.
Okay.
Sorry to be for interrupting, but.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
The change of manager of Atlantica, that is not
So
complete,
the,
so that's on.
you have everything except the actual corporate authorization to appoint the gentleman as the manager, without which you cannot act. They've been aware of this, we've contacted them, we left it on the agenda, with hope that we push it in, because we have everything else, and they were not able to do that, so this has to be postponed until the 11th of July.
That was a holdup before, too. I mean,
Correct, and after they solved it, I was hoping that it would be an easy fix this time, right? But
Thank you.
but it's incomplete, to bring it in front of you incomplete would just be
Got it.
pointless. 'cause
There's
you're not
the owner's here.
Mr. Chair, though, I think we have to continue the hearing if we're gonna do that,
We didn't open a hearing.
we never opened.
And next up is the Finalize and adopt the fiscal year 18 goals and objectives.
All right.
Aye.
Hi, Lisa. All right, so, I don't know how you wanna do this, if you just wanna go through each one of the goals and make sure that you're comfortable with it, see if there's anything you wanna specify, anything that's too general that you wanna make more specific, or you wanna put a specific measurement in it.
Are these uploaded, or they're on display here?
They're not, you should have
They're in our
them.
packets.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for, in the packet. But
Yeah.
God help me.
They're very far in because,
No, I'm looking here in the packet.
oh, I can't access OneDrive anymore, so I've learned to.
I got it.
Yay. All right, so the first, we'll start right with planning and facilities. The first goal was plan, cost, and recommend funding to annual town meeting in May for the town hall project. How do you feel about that one? Pretty good?
Yep.
Good.
Second one, establish a requirement of best practices to successfully manage capital projects. There was some discussion about the value of what those best practices, at what
Right.
point we should start reviewing them. Do we still feel good about 500,000? You wanna go higher, lower? Wanna put any other specifics in there?
Who's gonna give us a recommendation on this?
Yes.
So why don't we wait and see if he has a number?
All right, we can move on to the next one while we're reading. The third one was stimulate discussions with town boards and reviewing the town planning and zoning initiatives.
Okay.
Yes, that's a good way of encapsulating what
Okay.
we spent a long time talking about.
All right, Chris.
Sorry.
Goal 2 was establish a requirement of best practices to successfully manage capital projects. We hit a level of $500,000 or more.
Do you have any input
Do
on
you
that?
have a recommendation on that level?
Yeah, it was
I'm gonna come back to you with some thoughts,
Okay.
you know.
We're gonna leave it
Tonight's
at
night we're
500
voting.
for now.
Yeah, if you wanna set it at that, and if
You can always adjust it.
Right, if I come back to you and say, well,
Finally
that
got it.
triggers, you know, the person on the dump truck, then I'll
Right.
come back and say, you
Yeah.
probably should do something else.
And during quarterly review, you may come back and say, you know, you wanna change that.
Can I make one little tiny minor
Absolutely.
thing on the stimulate discussions with town boards and reviewing? Can we remove the word the town planning and zoning initiatives?
Got it.
So it just says in reviewing town planning and zoning initiatives.
Yep.
Can you do that?
I think I can handle that.
Give me a the.
I'll give you an article.
All right, so,
I move we strike those.
So what? No, just the.
all right, in communication, there were 2, increased communication among committees and boards with the Board of Selectmen. So the only thing that is uncomfortable about this one is it's a little vague, increased communication, it's not as measurable. So how will you know that you've actually increased it?
Promote regular communication.
Hate to use the same word again that we have below, but if we have improved communications among committees, boards, and selectmen, and then when we go to set in the action plan, we'll then specify what we mean by improve.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, what we were talking about was, remember, trying to get them to come in regularly to give
All right,
us.
so we're gonna leave it increased, but we'll specify it within the action,
Sure.
in the action plan.
Oh, no, change increase to improve.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
should be improved.
Okay.
Improve communication.
We're not talking about actions of the committees and the boards, we're talking about communication. So
Right.
improve means improved communication,
Improved
not.
communication, yep.
And we'll get to the
Improved
details of
communication
that
among
next
committees
meeting
and
we do
boards
this.
Right.
with the Board of Selectmen, and then you'll define specifically what that improvement will look like,
Yeah,
what you
we'll
expect
decide
to
what we
see.
want to do.
I'm hung up on among, but let's keep moving.
Where does it say among?
Improved communication among committees and boards.
It's really improved board and committee communications with the Board of Selectmen, right?
But it's a group of 3, so it's among.
But we're not among, it's them and us, it's between. See what I'm saying? Or not,
So-
maybe it is among, maybe we want everybody to communicate.
Yeah.
We do.
So let's leave it.
You want another preposition in
No, we're okay.
there? Okay.
Sister Mary Joseph would
I
say
know,
among.
sorry, yeah, I'm gonna diagram the sentence.
And then the second one, improve communication between residents and town government staff regarding activities, issues, projects, and updates through multiple channels.
Yes.
Are the updates through multiple channels?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just had to throw it in. You're diagramming the sentence, I
Right.
gotta go with it.
I've given up my prepositional issues.
All right, so we're just gonna change the one to improve. Organizational management, we had one goal, review organizational structure of staff and committees to seek opportunities for increased efficiencies, training, development, and recognition.
Good.
Beautiful.
We'll get more specific in action plans too.
Mhm.
Technology, review current financial IT systems and alternative options and determine future needs.
I was wondering on this here, because review seems a little nebulous to me, and something more positive might be support current financial IT systems and alternative options and determine future needs, so that we feel that we're being positive and supportive in this area.
Well, this is actually, Kevin, driven by the concept that we actually might need to make a change. The financial IT system that we have now may not be up to snuff. And so that was the basis for initiating a review of what we have.
Well, how about if we review,
How about evaluate?
That's,
Or assess, yeah.
Assess is less.
so we evaluate current financial IT systems and support alternative, alternative options. I'd like to get the sense in here, what I'm getting at is I'd like to get the sense that we're being, in a positive way, supportive of what's going on in IT in the town, because it's important for now and in the future, so.
I think part of this is that IT's asking that we do it.
What about assess and support?
Yeah, that'd be fine with me, assess and support
Assess
would
and
be
support?
fine.
Yeah, but I mean, I just don't wanna kid ourselves. The reason we're going down this path is as your IT director will tell you, we have deficiencies in our current software platform.
Right, and I just wanna put a positive, these are our goals that get promulgated throughout the town, the Mariner and so forth.
We're gonna
I'd like to-
positively review this.
Well, I see if we use the word support, we're okay.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanna make sure that we're not kidding ourselves, that we're probably looking for a replacement.
Replacement of what?
The software says the idea.
This is about the software.
Yeah, I know, so when we do it, we'll do it with a smile on our face.
Okay, fair enough.
So we are at assess and support current financial IT systems.
That good?
Sure.
Yeah?
Two verbs, all right.
Second one, drive technology infrastructure development to support key initiatives, including efficiencies in operational automation, record keeping, and communications with residents and staff.
That's good.
Fine, by me.
Okay.
Very proactive.
Up to financials.
Financials. Number one, participate in the hiring of the finance director.
I
I think that's our job, isn't it?
well, actually, it's not.
It's not.
Oh, it's not.
It's not. And so I'm a little reluctant with that one. The hiring of the finance director is the role of the town
Assistant.
manager.
Assistant hiring?
Support.
Support.
This is an area where you're supported.
Well, can one
But,
thing,
but it is our job to approve, or if you will, affirm the decision. So that's ours. Our role in this, I think, is to do everything we can to make certain that we have the most qualified group of candidates possible.
right, so what you're saying, emphasize, what it is we have charter responsibility here for this, and the police chief and the fire
Fire
chief.
chief, right.
So we need to be active in terms of how we, that's why I think it's important to have a word like, a more active role in it, like what we have there, participate, because we do actually participate more in this than we would in other hiring decisions, because we have a charter responsibility.
So, and I totally agree with you. So, I mean, one of the activities we might want to do here is review Chris's job description, right? I mean, I think that's a completely valid activity for the selectmen to do, is to look at the job description and say, are we okay, are we comfortable with this? Is this?
The job description for the finance director
Right.
that Chris drafts.
Yeah,
Right.
so I say Chris's
Exactly.
job description is
Right.
defined
We're not
by
gonna
it's
craft it.
law.
So, could I maybe suggest support the process for the hiring of a finance director?
We're
The
supporting
process-
and we're actually reviewing too.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
need to be,
And-
we need to get the message here that we're a little bit involved in this, because we have a constitutional or charter responsibility here. It's different than just if he was hiring, one that's not, this is named in our charter. So we should participate in that which the
Yeah,
town
because
has
we want
asked
this
us
to go smoothly.
We want
We don't want this to bump at the end and not get the
Yeah, and
candidate
the
voted
town, when
in.
they voted on this at town meeting and we changed the charter, indicated they want the selectmen involved in this. And, yeah, so we should act accordingly, is my view.
So how do you want to word it then?
Participate's fine with me, the way we had it,
Okay.
because we discussed this last time.
Okay. Is that right?
Again,
I understand Steve's point, he doesn't want us doing the work.
Right.
Well, we're not, we're just participating,
Yeah.
what we could do is say
Participating
participating
in the
pursuant,
process,
pursuant to
Town Manager Act.
Town Manager Act, but, yeah. You
Yeah,
say,
Yeah, I don't think we need to say that, right?
no, I don't,
Right.
I don't need to say it, because that's the way we would participate.
Right.
But we need to show a little more, some more activity here, because we're gonna wanna have a hand in it.
Okay,
We
so,
should.
So how would you like to,
where do you draw,
Participate.
my question is, where do you draw the line?
do you want to participate, or you want to participate in support in the hiring?
Well, this
I'd
would,
like another,
all right, so
No,
let's
Wordsmith it.
this could also be that when we go to do, this is the goal that gets promulgated to the town and everybody, we're gonna participate in the process. Now, when we go to specify how we're gonna do that, that's the next session. Well, what Steve's question is quite good and legitimate, but next meeting. Because we are gonna participate on it.
It's a bit like saying, you know, to your teenager, be home at a reasonable time, and I'll tell you when the reasonable time is after you passed it.
So-
I
So-
am really cautious about the word
how about
participation.
support and evaluate? So we're supporting the town manager and his activity, and we're evaluating the results, right? And we don't take any authority away from the town manager, and we're supporting the activity and evaluating.
But the thing is
And we're not doing, there's no
Yeah, no,
doing in that.
But we're not actually doing it, but we do have something of a role that's more than just evaluating objectively. We're supposed to participate in this. The town charter, our constitution, voted by the citizens, has told us they want us involved in this. So that's all, I wanna get that in.
Well-
And if we just review and evaluate, that's a little too, that's weaker than I think the town wants us to be. That's all.
Okay.
If we didn't have this language in the town charter,
We
I
did.
wou't make this
But we
discussion.
don't.
What about
We don't.
participate
We
actively?
don't.
We do have it in the town
No,
charter.
we have the ability to affirm or reject, nothing further.
For 3 positions.
Right, but it's affirm or reject. It's not participate, it's not draw up the job description, it's not anything else.
Right, but,
It's affirm or reject.
but,
We can give guidance
Okay, so
to a
how
town
do you wanna
manager, and
word
I
it?
agree with
yeah,
that.
yeah.
You know?
So how do you want to word it?
give guidance.
I was listening to what you had proposed previously, which I think was support and
Support and
Review.
review.
All right.
Because ultimately, we will participate in the most important
Because either we
point,
support
and
or
that
don't
is-
with the vote.
Yeah.
Or you can say support and give guidance, right? I mean, you know, that's a little more active than just review.
Fine.
I
Support and
wrote
give guidance.
support and provide guidance, right?
Provide guidance, that's perfect.
In
Let's
the
go with that.
hiring of.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You okay with that,
If
Chris?
we,
Support and provide guidance?
I'm obviously sitting here not saying anything purposely.
Right.
I just want to have some clarity too,
Smart, right?
and again, so that I know what we're, you know, obviously, we all want the same thing, we want a good, high-quality candidate. And I just want to, I think what you just got, is to say support and provide guidance is great, I think that's,
And then we'll
Because you're
drill
going to.
down on what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, review the job description
because
or
you do,
whatever.
you know, I do want to get clarity on that in the next couple of weeks, as we go forward, we're going to talk a little bit about it later in the agenda anyway.
how about if we said support, provide guidance pursuant to the Town Manager Act, because that's the law
Okay,
anyways.
fine.
That work?
That gets everybody,
That work?
That's fine.
yeah, put in pursuant to the,
So support and provide guidance
pursuant to the Town
pursuant to the
Manager.
Town Manager Act. for
Pursuant to the
hiring
responsibilities.
Of the finance director.
Okay, support and provide guidance pursuant to the Town Manager Act in the hiring of the finance director.
Good by me.
All in favor?
Okay,
Looks good?
Fine,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Number 2, review a plan for advanced financial training for town officials.
okay, this was, I think, a great idea, and, I
How
like
about
put a little-
review and approve?
And I would say, yeah, I would change review, because that's again too passive for me, and implement a plan for advanced financial training, because this is something that's good enough we should actually do, or get done.
Am I good?
Good.
Implement.
Yeah,
Like
implement's a
it.
good word.
Implement a plan
Implement a
for
plan.
advanced financial training for town officials.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Number 3, explore options for more effectively managing the town pension reserves.
Love it.
Clear as a bell.
Everybody good with that?
Good.
And number 4, analyze strategies for fully funding OPEB.
Perfect as
Okay,
well.
what I had on that is I might want to see, and I'll tell you why, analyze strategies for funding OPEB and remove the word fully, because we want to analyze the whole picture. To put the word fully in adds a predicative bias as to which way our analysis is going to come up. I mean, we want to eventually end up funding this completely, but in terms of doing an evaluation, let's make it totally clean, and we may end up saying fully later, but let's remove the fully and just analyze all of our strategies for funding OPEB and have a broader discussion. One.
All right.
Yeah, I don't have
Okay.
a problem with it, yeah.
I'm okay.
All
All
right.
right.
Steve?
Just thinking it through.
I mean, we're gonna have to fully fund
I mean,
it at some
funding,
point.
you can read it to mean funding OPEB, which
No,
is
you
fully.
can, I mean, ultimately, the reason for proposing it in the first place was to identify
Ensure that it
what it
gets
would
done.
take. That was
Possible
really
to
the goal
fully-
that
Right,
I had in mind.
right.
Um,
But I don't think you necessarily lose that meaning.
No, no, no.
by
No,
removing
no,
Yeah, we
again-
can still do that within the umbrella of a broader discussion.
So you could say, analyze strategies for funding OPEB liability,
Okay,
you know, and leave it,
Yeah, if you want to add the word
Yeah.
liability, I don't care.
all right?
yeah.
All right.
If you want to be totally clean, you don't need that word liability, you know, because OPEB by definition is a liability, but I won't get into that.
Good, good,
So analyze strategies for funding OPEB liability.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, there was a hand up back there, it was the person, I don't know whether you want to address it or not.
Okay, so that's it. I'm gonna finalize these and set it up to you, and then we can discuss
And then we come up with specific goals within
specifically
these.
how are you going to
specific
achieve
whatever.
this?
Yeah.
And we'll stick to the
It's
quarterly
magic.
check-in.
It's all magic.
I was gonna ask the chair, when are we gonna do that? It seems last year we did another separate session to do that, because that's pretty important. So we're gonna set that at some point.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not something I think we should do at a selected meeting, and we're gonna
No,
be a
it's gonna be
separate meeting for this.
Separate meeting.
Full with sandwiches and so forth,
Oh, of course.
potato chips,
No more cupcakes, though.
brownies and cupcakes.
Brownies are gone, no more brownies and cookies. I know, but
We could go to a Red Sox.
Now you know why
game
we
and
can't
do
fully fund it.
Yeah, I'll do that. Always take us out, Jack.
I'll make the
Think it's
brownies.
pretty-
About that time of year, you take
Now
us.
you're talking.
I do have a Yankees game ticket.
You do?
Thank you.
I'd like to talk to
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Lisa.
Lisa.
So
It
next
was
up
kind
is
of magic, taking that last meeting, distilling it.
the one page.
Yeah.
Next up is purchase of cemetery lots. So these are typically cemetery lots that have been bought at one point and are returned to the town, and the town buys them back. So I'm not sure how many there are.
They're 8, if I recall.
Just
Yeah,
means
8
that
at
you-
$500.
Just means that you've lived longer than we expected?
I think what happens
Move
is that
out.
people will buy a family block of them,
Yeah.
and then sometimes people move out of town, they move to other locations, and they don't wanna schlep back here for the final
Got it.
buy, so, so they're keeping 2, this particular family's keeping 2
Final
of them.
countdown.
So they wanna sell back 8, and I don't think we'll have any problem reselling them, as I understand it, so. We buy them back at the fixed price, then we resell them, and I don't know what the price is, but it's more than that, so.
And this is one of the few items under the purview of the Board of Selectmen.
Well, your cemetery committee, we're a cemetery commission, it's one of your many,
It's a
you do liquor and death.
Liquor,
Right,
entertainment,
dog
and
bites.
cemetery. And birth, I think birth goes under there.
Bring out your dead.
Birth and death. Get you
Birth?
going, I think we're.
You'd also give assignments to the fence sitters, Jim, right?
On the fence sitter.
Yes.
So I'd ask for a motion to repurchase the cemetery lots,
The 8
8
cemetery
cemetery lots.
lots at $500 each, so moved.
Is there a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's more room. More room in there. Next up is the long-range planning group update. Katie Dugan and Tanya Bodell are here. Katie Dugan is here. This is a review of what had been developed through the long-range planning group, and I just wanted the selectmen to have a quick overview of what's been accomplished from the point of view of the long-range planning group. Planning from population and
Parcels,
other things.
permits, new growth.
Parcels, permits, and all those things.
Do you need this projector?
So I guess my question to the board is, I distributed this electronically, do you guys have it on your iPads? I was hoping that it would be up on the projector for the community, but it sounds like you might have to go paper or.
But I do have a monitor, I can set it up maybe tomorrow.
Right, is the green just not?
We got it emailed to us today.
Yep.
So, yep, I'm opening it.
What's a cable problem?
Should
Yeah,
work.
when it's green, often that's the case.
What's the matter with the flat screen?
No, the cable, it's probably the
Cable.
cable. Doesn't work. As you said before, it was coming up green. I don't know.
Oh, green.
If you guys feel it's important, Jen can work behind you to set up the projector while we start and just skip it.
Okay.
Okay. So does everybody have document if they want to have the document in front of them?
I have it, thanks.
Okay. So Tanya Bodell could not make it tonight. She wanted to come, so she sends her apologies. She got called out of town. The goal was really to give what is a overdue update to the Board of Selectmen about the work of the Long Range Planning Group, which you chartered about a year ago, last June. On page 1, what I want to talk about tonight is just a quick overview of the Long Range Planning Group, what we did in 2007, and then give you a summary of some of the key analysis, which is population, permits, parcels, new growth, and then where we are in terms of next steps. So on page 2, the Long Range Planning Group overview, just for those in the community that don't know, is a group that has the charge of collaboratively identifying, discussing, and developing responses to the long-term strategic issues which face Cohasset. And we work with town leadership, the town manager, finance director, along with school leadership, school superintendent, school business manager, and there's 2 from the Board of Selectmen, Steve and Jack, 2 from school committee, myself and Gina Stino, 2 from capital budget, and 2 from advisory, one of which is Tanya Bodell Carr, and that is our charter. On page 3, I really tried to just summarize in a picture what the Long Range Planning Group was able to accomplish this past year. We met 10 times during fiscal 2017. We've primarily focused on the 5-year forecast model and on trying to better understand some of the key revenue and cost drivers of our town's finances. On the left side really is what we did related to the 5-year forecast model. We did a deep dive on a number of areas in that 5-year forecast model, including setting the available revenue target by middle of December, which I think was timely and a necessary step in terms of being able to indicate both to the town and school departments what their available budget was for the fiscal 18 budgeting process. We did a deep dive on healthcare expense based on work that Mary Gallagher and Chris had done. We also began to peel apart a little bit some of the factors that drove a substantial increase in the Norfolk pension expenses for the town. And we began the process of forecasting new growth, which is something that we're going to need to continue in the next fiscal year. As a group, we also did set goals and objectives at the end of the year. We're talking about going through a similar process for fiscal 18 so that we have a clear view as to what we want to accomplish. And we did manage to collaborate with other town boards. You know, I apologize in advance for you guys being almost the last stop, but we did meet and present some of our findings to the master plan committee in May, and I actually was asked this evening by Open Space to come and present some of the work we did on population. So I think we've begun to kind of share some of the reports and analysis we did. There were really 4 major studies or analyses that we did. On the right-hand side, we looked at population as a cost driver. We looked at permits as a revenue driver. We looked at parcels as a revenue driver, and then we further took that permit and parcel information and began to develop a methodology towards forecasting new growth. On page 4, what I'm going to do from here is really hop into the 4 major analyses and kind of take you through the highlights of each of them. And feel free to stop me. There's a lot of information. I wanted to kind of quickly hit on a bunch of different slides, but if I'm moving too quickly, please raise your hand. But I also recognize you guys have a long agenda. So on page 4, we begin by talking about population as our first major analysis that we looked at. What you're seeing in front of you on page 4 is really just the U.S. Census data that shows that Cohasset, since 1970, effectively has grown at a rather slow pace in terms of adding, on average, slightly under 150 residents per decade, which works out to be about 0.4% compound annual growth. So it's been modestly growing after a very rapid period of growth post-World War II. As you guys are well aware, we're kind of midpoint between our 2010 census and our 2020 census, and while we take an annual town census, there's a couple reasons why we took a slightly different approach in terms of trying to get to where are we in the growth between the 2010 census and where might we be in 2020. If you flip to the next page, page 5, we did our own analysis looking at population, and you're probably asking the question, why don't you just take the town census data and use that? Two reasons. One is that we discovered, and we have now corrected, the fact that we have not saved electronically our town census data. We had a requirement to produce and report to the state our over 18 population, which is done, but none of the underlying data, the granular data that you would like to understand in terms of specific age groups and how they've been trending over time has been saved electronically. And so, unfortunately, we thought we were just gonna take detailed town census data and analyze it to our heart's content. What we landed out having to do was kind of recreate history in that sense, in that we were able to find through some residents in town 4 data points of our historical residence list, 2007, 2010, 2013, and 2016. So we had kind of 4 data points, which gave us 3-year looks at what was happening. We also noted going into this that the town census, and this has been a known problem with the town census, underreports children under 18. I mean, if you look at the last town census, it says that we have basically the same number of under 18 as we have registered in the schools. So you're missing all your under 5s, and we know that 15% of our town residents are out of, so we know that we're roughly missing 500 children under 18 if you use our town census data. What we were able to discover is that through required Department of Education reporting, there's actually a report that schools produce and send into the state every year called the School Attending Child Report, which not only has to report those that are in our public school system, but also marries up data with reporting from private schools, so you're actually able to encapsulate 100%, frankly, of all your children from ages 5 to 18. So in all senses, it's a better data set than what we're capturing from the town census. And it captures those missing individuals that we haven't been able to see historically. And the last but not least is the under 5, age 5, and we really didn't come up with a good way of cracking that, not unfortunately. We tried looking at aggregating live births, as you guys alluded to. That's something we actually do report in our CAFR, but it understates the number of under age 5, because lots of people arrive in town with, 1 toddler and 1 on the way. So what we landed up doing was really just looking at historical numbers from the US Census and coming up with a fixed number that we chose for under age 5. I mean, the good news, at least from the long-range planning group perspective, is that those individuals don't require a lot of services. So we were able to aggregate our residence lists in detail, plus our school-age children 5 to 17, plus our estimate of under age 5, to represent what we believe are kind of the trajectory of population from 2007 to 2016. And what we found is that the town overall is growing at a 1.3% compound annual growth rate, which is significantly above the last town census, the last US Census, where it was growing at 0.4%. And when we kind of reflected on this, given what's been happening in terms of new growth, in terms of new homes and constructions, the Toll Brothers, Cook, Avalon, there are many reasons why you could see an uptick in population occurring after the last census in 2010. What we did find is that in the over 18, there were 2 age groups that were growing higher than the 1.3% overall compound annual growth rate, and those were actually the 20-somethings, 18 to 29, and the baby boomers, 60 to 74. And so the way we landed out looking at this data was not necessarily that this is the end-all, be-all in terms of the actual population. What we're really trying to do is get a sense as to what the growth trajectory is going to look like. And so whether you take the last town census number which is 8,200, or whether you take the 8,600, which is the aggregate that the long-range planning came up with for 2016, what we wanted to communicate was that our population has gone through a period of rapid growth. And when we project it forward, I think we need to consider, do we take a relatively modest number, like the last census period of 0.4, as our baseline, or do we look at something larger going into the future, or do we get more sophisticated and kind of project a cone of probability as it relates to where our population will be in 10 years. But at least it gave us some data and information in terms of understanding the underlying trends in population. And I think it frankly uncovers some things that from a process standpoint, the town needs to do a little differently going forward. On page 6, I'm gonna jump into what was the next major analysis, which was permits. And this really was one of the major analyses that Tanya worked on. And what we did was we landed out taking detailed data by permit from buildings and inspections and looking at what the trends were from 2006 to 2016. I have to note up front that when we were working on this in the fall, 2016 was a partial year, so please, no one take away that we're falling off a cliff. That's really a half-year number. And if we were to update it, I think you obviously wouldn't see such a drastic dip there. But what we were able to take away from the data is that we have seen over the last period a compound annual growth rate of over 10% in terms of the number of permits that we've seen in town. And in particular, new homes and construction has spiked, where that's actually showing a compound annual growth rate at 30%. So 3 times the overall number of, 3 times the overall growth rate in new homes and constructions relative to the total permit data. On the next page, on page 7, we begin to break out what is really just looking at the new homes and constructions section of permits. So obviously there's 2 types of permits that we looked at, the red bar on the page before, which is overall improvements, and the blue bar, which is new homes and construction. And you can see on this page that there has been an uptick in terms of the number of new homes and construction permits that have been pulled. If you look at the period from 2006 to 2009, the average was 12. If you look at the period from 2010 to 2015, the average number of permits was 26. Now factored into that are obviously Toll and Cook. If you back out of that average of 26, Toll and Cook, it drops to 17. But even on just our base of new homes and construction, you've seen it increase from 12 to 17. And if you look back even farther into the 2004 master plan, they were quoting back in early 2000 that the average was 10. So we've gone from early 2000s with an average new homes construction of 10 to late 2000s at 12, now to 2010 to 2015 sitting at 17. So we have been increasing the number of new home construction on average. And on top of that, you've had the kind of accelerator of some of the developments such as Toll and Cook.
And is new home on previously undeveloped land?
It's a mix of both, so it is.
So if you go in and knock a house down and build a new house?
Yes,
That
exactly.
would be considered a new home?
That is in this number, so it is both, it is a house that's valued at $300,000 or valued at $500,000 land and house that gets knocked down and becomes a $1.5 million house, and it's also totally vacant lots that are valued at $250,000 that become $750,000 all in. So it is a mix of both. The next page, on page 8, another data point that we were able to kind of pull out of the permit data. Now this talks not just about permit number, but about permit value. And again, we're focused just on new homes and construction. But what you can see in terms of the average permit value for new homes is that there has been a significant spike. The average permit from 2006 to 2013 on a new home construction was $460,000. If you look at what's happening 2014 to 2016, that average permit value is $720,000. Now, mind you, this is just permit value, and you'll see much later in the presentation that permit value and assessed value are two different things. You have to actually link what was pulled in the actual buildings and inspection database to the assessor's database to really see what the difference is. But just even in the permits, people are pulling larger permits, and it has spiked quite a bit since 2014. Okay. If you flip to page 9, this takes a look at not just the permit value, but also the number of permits, and says, what are we generating in terms of the value of the permits in aggregate? And so this goes back to looking at both improvements and new constructions and new homes. On average, we generate, in terms of total permitted value, $24 million. Now, this is obviously is not fees. This is the value on which those fees are assessed. But 15 million of that just comes from improvements, which is the red bar, and the other 9 million on average comes from new homes and constructions. But what you can see is that, yes, when you look at improvements, there was a dip during the recession in, from 08 to 09 and 2010, but it is not as sensitive to recession and economy as the blue bar is, which is new homes and constructions, which you can see is variable, not only based on the economy, but just based on the number of properties that are under development. So you definitely have to look at this two different ways in terms of what is your base of new improvements that are just happening, new baths, new kitchens, a deck, versus the new construction, whether it's tear downs or it's actually new houses being put on vacant land. Okay. If you flip to page 10, we're now going to jump into the parcels analysis that we did. The parcels analysis takes data from the assessor's database. So we're in the buildings and inspections permit data. We're now hopping over into the assessor's database and talking about our land values. So slide 10, this shouldn't come to anybody's surprise. If you look at our total assessed value in town in 2006, it's $2.8 billion on which we raise our tax levy, and the vast majority of it is the blue bar, which is residential. So we all know that residential properties dominate our tax base. This just confirms it categorically. If you flip to page 11, another data point that we were able to pull out, and this ties a little bit to the previous comment about the spike in permit values, you can now see, based on looking at the distribution of residential assessed values in 2009, the average was $790,000. If you flip forward to the same distribution of residential assessed values in 2016, the average is moved to $825,000. So when you think about literally less than a 10-year differential and seeing an average move up that much, but more importantly, if you look at the distribution in terms of the bar, the median back in 2009 was sitting around $500,000 in terms of, if you took the total number of houses, the median, which is the exact midpoint, would have been $400,000 and $500,000, and it was obviously influenced by some of the bigger homes in town, so your average was $790,000. You flash forward to 2016, you now have basically the median and the average collapsing around $825,000, $850,000. So the overall average assessed value and the median assessed value have now collapsed in terms of the distribution towards the norm. If you flip to page 12 again, Tanya took a look at the total assessed value and how it's changed year to year. And there's two components to our overall assessed value. There is the increase in value from the prior year, which is the red bar, which is driven based on changes in market value. And then you've got the green bar, which is really new growth, new property value. And obviously you can see from this that the average change in assessed value year to year varies greatly. In a recession period like 2010 and 2011, it's negative, and you see that the big piece of that negative in 2010 is coming from the red component, which is the market value. You can see you're coming out of the recession in 2011, the change in market value is the negative is decreasing, and then once you get back into 2012 and beyond, we're generating positive changes to our overall assessed value in town. When you look at it, the average is 30 million, 23 million is the average in terms of the impact in market value, and 7 million is the average in terms of the change from new property value. It's obviously highly variable due to the economy, because the largest component in the change in assessed value is based on the assessed market value, which fluctuates with economy. Page 13 just reiterates a point that I had made earlier, and again, it takes it from two perspectives. And I apologize, it's a little bit blurry just because I was cutting and pasting out of a PDF into a PowerPoint because I didn't have access to Tanya's original. But on the left-hand side, this is just a reiteration of the permit data that I just ran you through, where you had the low number in terms of new permits for new homes at 12, with an expected at 17. On the right-hand side, Tanya actually took a look at changes in land code values and in the assessor's database to say, okay, does the permits being pulled have any correlation to what we're seeing in the assess database in terms of houses moving from a code 131, which is partially developable land, to maybe a 130, which is developable land, i.e. ready for a new house to be plunked on it, to a developed lot, which is codes 101 to 109. And the answer is, you can see significant movement, which is the bars in the graph on the right, and the average amount of movement that you're seeing amongst these codes averages out to 14 parcels per year. So you're seeing great correlation between kind of the movement that you're seeing in your parcels on the right with what you're seeing in terms of the permit data. So where we came to in terms of the conclusion is that historical trends support the fact that right now we're seeing 15 properties, new properties per year as kind of the average. The next question that we developed, or that we tried tackling in the parcels, was on page 14, which looks at what is left in terms of developable lots. And this is literally a summary of your residential portion of your assessed database, doing it by land use code, which is that column on the left, LUC. And you can see that in the blue shaded section at the bottom, we still have in code 130, which is developable land, 104 lots, which equals 167 acres of developable land in Cohasset. And then underneath that, you have in code 131, potentially developable land, another 34 lots with 104 acres that are potentially developable. So that combination of the two is, over 250 acres of potentially developable or developable land. The other observation that we had, and I guess I was surprised by this, was the amount of movement that you can see over the last 10 years in codes 132, 131, 130 into actual residential developed property. I had this vision that if you were in 132, you were always in 132, but you can see specific land parcels moving from 132 to 131, from 131 to 130. So it is more dynamic based on technology and how sewer connections, but also how septic technology is progressing, so that what was once undevelopable can become developable. So there is a pipeline of acreage that can continue to sustain new homes and construction going into the future. Now, we did not take the view that, at some point somebody needs to do of overlaying specific zoning requirements, but this is just a macro view of, is there a pool of acreage out there that could be developed? And the answer is yes. On the next page, on page 15, we wanted to answer the question, could you have another kind of one-timer like Cook? And the answer is yes. I mean, it's not something that we could specifically stake out and say it's gonna happen in 2020, and, this is gonna, what it's gonna look like. But on this page, what we did was we took all of the properties that are over 4 acres, as an individual parcel, and you can see that there's 62, large residential properties of 4 acres or larger, that totals 400 acres. And so could one of these in the future, be subdivided into a parcel of 10 homes, of 5 homes, of 15 homes? The answer is maybe. None of us can kind of pinpoint when and which one that's going to be, but there again, we were trying to analyze from a macro perspective, is there the fuel, the raw material out there for another one-off like that to happen in the future? And I think the answer we came to was yes.
And this particular slide's really compelling to me, but is this the kind of thing that the master plan group will then look at this and utilize this? Because, this is something that
Yeah.
begs a whole bunch of questions, right? How are these all district, where are they physically, that kind of thing.
Is there a road available, accessible to it, things like that?
Right.
Somebody, I was just over at Open Space at 6:30, and somebody said, well, there's a parcel on Redfin on Howe Road that's being advertised as having 15 available, houses to build on it.
We've been notified.
So, again, I think that definitely would be a next step for master plan to look at.
Yeah.
But again, it was actually really reassuring for me to know what kind of sources of data are they relatively clean? And the answer is the assessor's data is as it should be, a very clean database to look at, and you can look at it for numerous years back. So on page 16, we were really trying to answer, can the recent development trends last for a while? And the answer we came to and I won't go into the methodology behind this, but basically we took what was the developable land and potentially developable land, that 400 or so acres that 250 so acres I was referring to before, and the large residential properties, and saying, if you had a couple of these properties develop on the large residential, and if you had a continued 15 lots per year developed, how many years in the future would you have fuel for new growth? And the answer is that for the next 20 years, there's fuel. Once you kind of head past that, I think that's another question. But in terms of the time frame, the long-range planning group is looking at specifically the 5-year forecast. There's no cliff coming unless we take actions from a zoning perspective, from a master plan perspective, to stop the growth. And I think that's a question that we need to address.
And that's using
as
a
community.
full acre for property size.
Yeah, we do, in the box on the right, Tanya did, if you chopped them up into quarter, if you chopped them up into half, into 3/4 to 1, again, this is just kind of mathematical proof that, at least for the time range on the long-range planning, and potentially even the next master plan, which is a 10-year, if you want to change the trajectory, you're gonna have to do something specific, because the fuel for the fire is sitting out there. So that's kind of the end of the parcel conversation, which is there are buildable lots, and there's a couple different scenarios where that growth could continue. On page 17, what we did was we then began to try and think about new growth. And if you guys think back to the 5-year forecast that you look at every year, you start at the top with our tax levy, and the biggest component is obviously the 2.5 growth on our overall assessed value, but a very important piece is the new growth line. And in the last couple of years, we've been projecting in our 5-year forecast, somewhere between $400,000 and $450,000, and yet we've been generating actual new growth in excess of $600,000. And part of the conversation that we've had in long-range planning is, if you're forecasting $400,000 in new growth and you're having $600,000 come in, while that's great that you've just generated $200,000 in cash flow, I don't think we have an understanding of, is that gonna be 100,000, is it 200,000? What is actually driving the actuals versus forecast? And the way we've done it historically is just based on averages. We've looked at, 10-year data, and the average is 400,000, so we forecast the average. And we've had this conversation of, can we get more predictive? How do we get smarter? How do we use actual data from the permits? How do we use actual data from the assessed to actually drive a predictive model instead of one that is static based on historical averages? And so that's what we began to attempt in this last analysis that we just completed and presented at the beginning of June. And what we did on this first slide is that we decided, as our first pass, we were really just gonna focus on new homes and construction. Again, if you look at these two lines that are charted, and again, this is back to permit value, for the first time, new homes and constructions have, in terms of the annual value, outpaced the steady click of new porches and kitchens and baths. It's also the most variable component of it, and so if you think about what's truly gonna generate the big spikes in terms of your ability to forecast new growth, it's likely the new homes and construction component of it. And to be frank, it was 300 data points versus 1,000. So we decided to go for the easy chunk of the data first and see if we could make it say something. If you flip to the next page, we begin to get in, there's actually 5 kind of conclusions that we came to in terms of what the permit data married up with the assessed data looks like. And what we landed out doing was we took the permits for 2006 to 2014 on a permit by permit basis for all, call it 300 homes that were built in that period. And we literally manually married it up with what is the incremental growth that is reported out in the assessor's database. So we could take the original permit, when it was pulled, what the permit value of that particular new home construction was gonna be, and then we flipped over to the assessor's database and said, okay, what do we see in terms of incremental growth? When did it come in? How much did it come in? What was the ending assessed value of that property? And this is where we began to see some really interesting correlation between what was happening in permits and what was ultimately happening in terms of assessed value, which is driving your new growth in town. And so what you're seeing on the chart on page 18 is actually, the first conclusion is that there is a very predictable lag for new homes and construction from when the permit is pulled to when the final kind of uptick in the incremental growth happens in your assessed database. And so from the date that the permit is pulled, there's an average lag of 2.1 years. So for the new growth that we're gonna experience in fiscal 17 is based on a permit that was pulled 2015 or before. And so there's good news in that we can actually look at 2016, 2017 permits that are being pulled and have a shot at trying to analyze what's gonna hit us a year or two out. So there's definitely a lag between when the permit is pulled and when the incremental growth actually is completed in the assessor's database, and the average is 2.1 years. On page 19, we took it from a slightly different perspective. This is the same time lag, but it looks at it by year. And so each of these permits are then broken out in terms of how long the lag was. And what you'll see is that the most consistent lag between the time of the permit to when it actually is completed incremental growth in the assessed values is the red bar, which is a 2-year lag, and the gray bar, which is a 3-year lag. But if you look at what happens in a recession period in 2008 and 2009, you actually begin to see that there are some significant lags when you go into a recession. So in 2008, there were actually 3 homes that had a 7-year lag between when the permit was pulled in 2008, and it wasn't until 2015 that it actually hit the assessor's database. Now, a portion of it may have hit the assessor's database when it was first pulled 2 years later, but the actual full impact in terms of all the incremental upticks to get to the new assessed value based on the completed construction or completed permit took 7 years. And similarly in 2009, there were some that took 6 years. As you move to the right, you can kind of see that once we get out of the recession period, we're looking at 2012 and 2013, basically everything's clicking along at either a 2 or a 3 year lag. So it's actually helpful in a non-recession period to know that from the time you pull the permit to when it's gonna actually hit your assessed value. When you're in a recession period, you have to begin to become a little bit more sophisticated in terms of how you roll it into your new growth model, because it may take longer. And in some cases, on the next slide, which is page 20, you actually see that what people pulled in terms of the permit and the actual ending assessed value are two different things. And what this data does is looks at the variance between the permit value and the ultimate assessed value. And what we found is that the average difference was $364,000. So
Seems like very high.
it is it's an average. So one of the things that you're seeing happen is that it's obviously pulled up by some of the large variances. So for example, if you look at 2007, the average is a $500,000 variance, but that's pulled off significantly. I mean, you could do a median and probably have a slightly different conversation, but it's obviously pulled off by that one particular property, which is a high value property where there was a significant delta between what the actual permit was and what the ending assessed value was, almost $2.5 million.
Going forward, maybe on these data points like this, we could pull off the top high and leave the low one.
And, so there were for us, there were two conclusions. One is that obviously you can't take the permit value as a predictor, a straight predictor of what the ending value in the assessed database is. We knew that there was going to be a variance. The other conclusion is that as you go through and look at your building and inspection process, there has to be some circle back and conversation about permit fees and how do you close the gap between what somebody does as their best guess for pulling a permit on a new house and what the actual assessed value is at the time. On page 21, again, this is looking at the same permit data and then the ending assessed value. And what you see happening is that Cohasset is becoming the land of $1 million homes, where there's basically a 2x difference between what is the permit value and the ultimate value in terms of the value of the land and the building. But you're seeing
some of that may be that you're building on a piece of property and you may still be building a $400,000 house, but location-wise, it's worth more.
I actually would argue that it all has to do with the size of the house that people are building.
Okay.
You saw the permit, you saw the average permit on new homes go from 400,000 to 600,000. People are building bigger
They're
homes,
just
and
bigger
so the
houses.
ending values are larger. I mean, this is totally driven based on size.
Okay.
And you can see that all around town, is that we're not building capes.
Yeah.
We're building substantial houses, whether it's a new home or whether it's a tear down and a replacement of the existing home. And this just kind of confirms it pictorially. The last slide is really the conclusion when it comes to all of this. And I have to credit Tanya for doing the linear regression. Last time I did a regression analysis was business school or sometime thereabout. But what this tells you is that there is actually a strong correlation between the permit value as a predictor of the incremental growth. And what we learned, and you know that by the fact that you look at the R-squared, which is the correlation, and it's 39%. And what we're saying is that we now have the beginnings of a mathematical model where we can take a look at what's being pulled in terms of the volume of permits, add in the time lag, and we can begin to predict what the incremental growth is going to be in our assessed database, hence what the new growth is going to look like. And the great news is that we've done this looking at new homes and new construction. The bad news is that we now need to figure out the other bigger piece of the permit data, which is the improvements. And John Chapman has graciously volunteered some of his analytical ability and time to help Tanya and I look at that next methodology. So we're hoping that one of the things that we can do is not only refine the preliminary analysis we did here to get to the conclusion that there really is a relationship that we can begin to model, but also figure out the kind of the from a data perspective, the messier piece of it, which is the improvements, because you're gonna need to both look at the permits from an improvements perspective, which is, you know, a steady base of $15 million per year in permit value, but also need to figure out the more spiky $9 million in permit value annually that is related to new homes and construction. So we had a great year. We had some great conversations about population, parcels, permits, and also new growth. So if you flip to the last slide, you know, what are we up to next? And the answer is that we've got a lot of ideas. I did a little wordle here of, we did a little bit of brainstorming at the end of our last meeting, and there were lots of conversations around what should we be doing in terms of next steps. The long-range planning group meets in mid-August to set goals and determine kind of committee projects and analyses that we want to do for the coming year. And I would say that there are definitely some projects that we need to finish concluding. Like, I don't think we should let the new growth analysis that we've gotten to a point where we finally have this small aha go. We need to see it through and really get to the conclusions there in terms of being able to put together a truly predictive model. We've talked a lot about reworking aspects of the actual 5-year forecast model to take what has been a great base model, but add to it things that we think we need to understand, like free cash flow, like some of the historical numbers that are buried in there but not really visible when you're looking at the model. And so one of the things that we've talked about as a group is really reworking that so that it does the things that our town needs in terms of planning. We took what was a model from another town and made it our own, but I think there's more modifications we can do to continue to make it work for us. And then there's a lot of other things we could tackle, and I think that's the real question is, you know, what else do we want to do? I would honestly love to have Lisa potentially help us wrangle down priorities. I watched you work with these guys, and I know they're a rowdy bunch. We'll give you a run for your money.
The editorial called us opinionated.
Exactly. So, but that's really the next step, is to figure out what are our priorities.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and great update. One of the things I wonder if we want to consider is either having a joint meeting or having you guys come in right after a goal setting, because we have to do our budget goals for FY19 by September. So we are going to be setting goals for, you know, our budget, what is it called? Budget message for the development of the FY19 budget.
Yep.
In September, so it would be nice for us to have sort of a joint conversation so that we make sure our priorities are aligned on both sides, that, you know, that this group, in support of what we're talking about financially and what we're thinking is gonna be the priorities for FY19 in terms of budgeting, address or utilize some of the data that you have put together, and will continue. You know, if we're talking hotels and meals tax or whatever, and you're not, I mean, it makes sense that we would have some kind of a summit conversation about that. If the selectmen think that's a good idea.
One quick thing, on page 8, where it has the new permits, new construction improvements.
Yeah.
A few years back, I looked at unemployment rate for the town, median income for the town, and individual income for the town, and it correlates almost identically to the number of permits by calendar year from 2006 all the way up till as 2016, where that begins to almost approximate the unemployment rate pre-recession, the median town family income, and the individual income almost exactly year to year. As the income went up, as did the permits and number of new growth, which is interesting. And the other thing from this, these are much better numbers than what the state is going to review. So I think from a planning point of view, these are terrific numbers to look for our town. I mean, we're going to get monies from Chapter 70 and Chapter 90 and and local aid that's gonna come from probably the national census or the state census, these are gonna be clear. And we don't get a tremendous amount of local aid, but we get a lot of money from new growth, and we get money from the growth of the population, where you'll see that income come into the town. So I think this is a great way to fashion a model for potential new growth, revenue for the town, as opposed to what the state is gonna probably have a much lower number of people in town, growth, and all of the other aspects that are there. So this is tremendous.
No, it's been a good conversation with the long-range planning, especially when we've been grounded in data. I have to say that it's gotten, members from each of the important boards kind of on the same page as it relates to not only really understanding the details, which some of us did, but a lot of people didn't understand in granular detail the 5-year forecast model, but then there's really no debate on kind of some of the basics of our, height, weight, body mass in terms of, parcels, permits, population. And we can now, once we have that common kind of grounding and understanding of the data, it makes it much easier to have conversations about where do you go from here, or how you see things changing. There's obviously a lot of hard conversations left to be had, but we've tackled at least some of the basics this year.
Any comments?
Guys.
No, thank you.
Well said.
That was
Thank you.
absolutely tremendous, so thank you so much.
Very good.
A lot of effort, a lot of time for that.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Katie.
And you're not rid of me yet.
Not yet.
Sorry.
There's more.
There's more.
So next up is the special education reserve policy update. So the state municipal modernization act basically is one of the ways that the state is trying to whittle down the effectiveness of local government, and spend special stabilization reserve fund rulings and laws have been honed down a little bit more. So this is just a review. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so if you remember at town meeting, we obviously approved the change in the Mass General Law, which governs our special education reserve fund. We moved it from Chapter 40, Section 5B to Chapter 40, new Section 13E under the Municipal Modernization Act. When we had adopted 2 town meetings ago under 5B, Section 5B, that summer we had all worked to put together a reserve policy that you approved last October. Now that we've actually changed the chapter and verse to Section 13E under MMA, the school committee has taken action to update that reserve policy. We had foreshadowed this when we met with you guys back when we were talking about the warrant article. This is really all that we're proposing in the updated reserve policy. The language in red makes our reserve policy that you guys adopted back in October and updates it for the actual Section 13E language. So,
Which is what we approved at town meeting.
which is what we approved at town meeting, and we subsequently approved the new fund under Section 13E. We transferred the funds, the $250,000 to Section 13E, and we shut down the 5B one, so
So this
we're now.
conforms our policy
This conforms
to the
our
law
policy.
which we approved.
Exactly. And it's little things, like, under the MMA, Section 13E is called a special education reserve fund instead of a stabilization fund, so all the language now calls it consistently a special education reserve fund. It, under transfers in, it caps our ceiling at what is now state law under Section 13B, which is 2% of net school spending, which based on fiscal 17 or 18, I think it's 18, is 2% would be 289,000, so we're currently funded at 250. Our cap for fiscal 18 is $289,000 for the reserve fund at 2% of the state's net school spending. It obviously, under transfers in, changes the mechanism to just conform with what's in the law, which is that it's now a majority vote, it's not a 2/3 vote, it's a majority vote of school committee, but then more importantly, a majority vote of town meeting. So all transfers in to the reserve fund are still governed by town meeting. It just dropped from a 2/3 threshold to a 50% or majority threshold, and that's what we're reflecting here in the reserve policy, which is what is the law under section 13E. And then under transfers out, one of the reasons that we moved to this mechanism was that the transfers out could become real time, and so the language at the bottom just shows that the transfers out are now governed by a majority vote of the school committee and a majority vote of the board of selectmen. So it's no longer governed by a transfer out at town meeting once the money's in there. If we follow the procedure described above to justify the transfer out as a unanticipated, unbudgeted cost, then a majority vote of the two boards can transfer it out. We also lowered, in the paragraph above that, so the second paragraph from the bottom, what were the caps in terms of the amount that we could transfer out in 1 year and 2 years. I mean, obviously, we went from having a fund under the last 5B policy that was capped at $500,000 per the reserve policy. We've now moved it down to 2% of net school spending, which is $289,000, and so we needed to move the amount of transfers to not to exceed $200,000 in 1 year and not to exceed $300,000 in 2 years. We still capped it at $200,000 from a school committee perspective because we have seen single point unanticipated moves that can cost the district $200,000, and that would be the scenario that we would have not budgeted for, that we would truly need the reserve for. So that's how we chose those numbers, and I think we demonstrated to you last time that we have seen swings up to $300,000 in special education out of district tuition year to year. And then the last page, we just changed the mechanism, so it previously had talked about transfers in and out because both of them, and under the previous legislation, went through town meeting. So under reserve procedures, we're now just talking about the fact that we need to notify you on a transfer in, which is the one that needs to go through town meeting. And we need to, obviously, it's really driven based on the warrant process, that we would need to have that discussion well in advance of special town meeting or annual town meeting. So the school committee has done their first and second read, and we actually approved the revised policy on June 7th. We are looking for you guys to go through your policy review process and give us an approval from the Board of Selectmen so that this can be adopted. Since this is really revisions based on the statutory requirements, not the wholesale rewriting, we were hoping that it would be an easy conversation.
This is the policy we have before us is the one that the school committee approves, so.
The one, and I didn't include it in your packet, but the last policy that was approved by you in October was first approved by the school committee, then reviewed by the long-range planning group, was further presented to advisory, and then you guys approved it in October. I'm now suggesting perhaps a more short-circuited version, which is school committee has done their first and second read and voted for you guys to go through your policy process, first, second read, whatever you do, and then approve. I'm not quite sure that we need to go through the same
So
presentation.
there isn't a separate policy that the school has, is what?
No, this is
So this is it, because this is our
This
policy.
is it. As I
So
view
once-
it is a joint policy owned by the schools and also owned by the town.
And this is it before us,
This
and this
is
is
it.
what the schools approved.
Yes.
Right, yeah. And this conforms to the law that we passed, right?
I've given it a quick, I think it's pretty, I don't wanna say it's ministerial, because that's not fair. I think what it does, it conforms to the statute, so it keeps all the same core, and it just changes the numbers and the approvals to meet the new realities.
And we do have the original one in our packet.
Yeah, the original one's right
Everything
behind it.
highlighted in red.
I mean, if you wanna give it
That
if
is-
you wanna chew on it,
No, I don't think we need to.
well, it's up to you. I mean, if you wanna chew on it, you can do it next meeting. If you're good tonight, good enough.
I can make a motion if you want.
Sure, ask for a motion to approve the town of Cohasset reserve policy special education fund as stated.
I make a motion that we approve the sped reserve policy update as presented to us tonight and is in our package.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank
No
you.
second read needed.
You got the first and second reading in one.
Exactly, I knew I could
We're
wear you
speed
guys
readers.
down.
We're an easy target for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Okay,
appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you
Dave.
very much.
Good housekeeping just to have this done and dusted.
Done.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Look forward to a facilitated session in August
Yeah.
by the pool.
Have to be by the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next up are the appointments and reappointments to boards and committees. I tried to hone down those that are ready for reappointment. There are fewer people either applying to X number of seats that are available, or the reappointments are subsequently here. So some of them will be, the one which is, I think, probably up at this point is the OPED committee, which we still have to consider what the new charges of the OPED committee would be, because the OPED has not met for about a year. So I would ask that probably be delayed until the next meeting, because we'll probably have to consider what options OPED is going to be entertaining, whether it's funding it, how to fund it, who would like to be on it, what the charge would be. They did a lot of work in years past, but I think it's going to have to be looked at to see what options will be out there for the OPED. So,
Yeah, I agree that we probably need to do just that.
This is something that we could do when we do our goals, our specificity.
I think so, yeah.
Why don't we
because-
cover that then?
Yeah.
Well, there are two areas where OPEB on its own is addressed in those objectives. One of them is examining options for pension
Pension.
reserves, because actually that's part of what a post-employment benefit is. And the other, of course, is retiree healthcare expense and looking to fund that liability. Up to this point, the committee has not been charged with anything surrounding
Other aspects.
I'm sorry?
Other aspects, yeah.
Anything outside of healthcare expense.
Yeah.
And there is, that's a fair amount to cover. They showed a great deal of expertise in knowing where to search, so I wouldn't be quick to give up on that committee.
Oh, not at all. No, it's a matter of.
No, I just think we can't appoint unless we have a real charge,
No,
and
I
that's a
think
conversation we
fair
should
enough.
have.
No, it's very important, and I don't want to dismiss it either, but I want to make sure we have a clear goal in mind for it. And just overall, just a comment from my point of view. These appointments and reappointments in boards and committees, I understand everyone on the committees some of them are voted in, but many of them, of the appointments, most of the appointments, are volunteers. I would ask that those who are willing to serve on committees, please do your best to spend the time, do the homework, show up, attend the meetings, so that you can contribute to a good discussion, which is needed for all of the committees that are out there. So with that as a background, I just want to reaffirm that commitment for, even though you may be in a appointed volunteer, I think it's important to make sure that you're willing to put the time in. So next up, the Cohasset Cultural Council. 3-year terms, is 3 positions available, and there's only 2 spots, 2 people that are willing to put forth their name. Dan Oak and Kate Farrington.
Here.
So there's 3 spots and we have 2 applications at this point. See what you're saying?
Yeah. So anyone from the Cohasset Cultural Council?
Or either of the applicants here.
Great. I would ask for a motion to approve the reappointment for a 3-year term for Dan Oak and Kate Farrington.
Could I just clarify the motion in that it's, I don't think it's a reappointment, I think it's new appointment, new 3-year appointments
I'm
for
sorry,
Dan
3-year
Oak.
appointment.
Dan Oak and Kate Farrington, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next up is Conservation Commission. There are 2 full positions of 3-year, which are 3-year terms, and 2 associate 1-year terms. And are there,
Generally, what we do on,
Point of
don't we,
clarification on that? Sorry to
generally-
interrupt.
yeah,
Jay Pampari, acting chair. There are 3 open positions on the COMCOM as of this evening. There are 3 open voting positions and 2 open associate positions. Just a point of clarification.
Yeah, I only think we can tackle 2 and 2, right?
Right.
Because that's all we have in the
That's all we
packet.
have in the packet, yeah.
I'm confused on that, 2 and 2.
No, as of.
We were,
We were aware
Letter
of
of
2 open.
resignation only came in,
Okay.
and then I just confirmed with the clerk today,
Okay.
so they're not prepared to fill that yet.
All right,
So
so
they're prepared to fill.
Handle that at a subsequent meeting.
Yes.
yes.
That's right. So there are 3 open 3-year positions, correct?
As
2
of today, there are, but you're filling 2 of them tonight, potentially, and then 2 associates, which are 1-year terms.
And do we wanna handle reappointments first? That's generally, the way we do historical, I mean.
Reappoint.
Whoever's gonna be reappointed, we handle those first, then we go on to the others, so, we start with that then.
So I asked for reappointment of the present 2 full positions, and I believe that's Alex Coins and Christopher McFarland, is that correct?
No. So, Mr. Quinn, it's actually
Quintus.
Quintus, yes.
Sorry.
Is seeking reappointment for a full 3-year term. And then there's an open full seat, and I believe it's, you want to.
Be happy to
Why don't
clarify.
you-
Yeah, so, clarify it for us, please.
Thank you. So you are correct, Alex. Jay Pampari. Alex Cornish is up for reappointment this evening for a 3-year term. In addition to that, we have 2 associates that are up for a reappointment. The associate positions are 1-year positions. As I understand, we have 1 opening. We have Eric Eisenhower and Chris McFarland, who have contributed a significant amount as associates in their tenure. And in addition to that, we have 1 new applicant, Kathleen Hunter Heffernan, who I believe has actually applied last year. I did speak with her. I've never met Kathleen, but I did speak with her on the phone the other day. She has a solid background in chemistry, master's degree in environmental laws. I believe you have her resume in front of you. I think that all 4 of these candidates would be tremendous assets to the commission.
So, who's gonna fill the open full-time seat? Is there a recommendation from your committee as to which of those 3 are filling that open seat?
Why do you
We
guys
draw our
do
name
this?
from a hat, right? It is our job, but.
Well, actually, so we
Correct me.
have 2 associate positions, and again, I think both candidates would be wonderful candidates. I've had the opportunity to speak with both Chris and Eric Eisenhower. Chris has been mentioned to me that if there were a decision made between the 2 of them, he would defer to Eric Eisenhower for appointment. Given that, I would recommend Eric solely at that point. However, given the fact that we will have an opening, then hopefully would be voted on at the next meeting, I would recommend that Chris also be appointed as a full-time member at the next meeting.
Can I ask a question? Just so I get the numbers straight. I recognize that we're not gonna act on 3 voting positions tonight, but there are 3 voting positions that are in actuality open. And then there are 2 associate positions. And if I'm reading this correctly, we have 4 candidates. Are there other candidates that have applied?
To my knowledge, no.
No.
Okay. So eventually, you're still going to have an opening for an associate.
We would have an associate, correct.
Thank you.
You know, I don't, just to put a word in, I don't think there's certainly it would be beneficial to have another associate. I don't know that there's an immediate need, but, you know, maybe you wanna do another posting or word of mouth, et cetera, to bring another associate on. It's great to have an associate to serve as a 1-year term. We have currently now, at your last meeting last year, you appointed 3 individuals for a 3-year term. Assuming we have 3 individuals tonight or next week, those 3 individuals would serve out another 3-year term. There's only 1 term that's left after that. It's actually my term that expires at the end of next year. So we have a solid basis, but things change with the commission. People have personal issues they have to deal with for whatever reason, so.
Okay.
Just another couple things on how the Concom rotates is they have, and it's not binding, but they have a kind of an understanding, I think, with last year's appointments, that they're a 2-year, 2
Correct.
terms, they can serve 2-year,
Right.
3-year terms, so theoretically in 2 years, you're gonna lose 3 members.
Absolutely.
So the associate positions really are kind of important to fill, even though they're only 1-year appointments. We would technically,
Right.
assuming they're having a good time and contributing well, reappoint them for 2 years, and then they're really ready to roll.
Right, we have instituted term limits, and there's a 2-year term, and that Alex would be termed out after this term. And as you mentioned, the 3 individuals that were appointed last year in 2 years, they would term out as well,
Right.
so.
So can I have the,
I believe actually the individuals are here. If you had any further questions that you wanted to ask, I'll turn it over to.
So can I have the candidates, would you like to come up and just introduce yourself to the town, the public, and a little background?
Doing all 3 at once, or would you like?
Come on, come up, you gotta
Come on up.
get, you might have to learn how to work together.
Yeah, well,
Assuming the vote goes okay.
so have a seat.
Have a seat.
Yeah, please. Make yourself comfortable.
Hi, I am Kathleen Hunter. It's nice to meet you. And I'd like to be appointed to the Conservation Commission. I was running for it last year, and now I'm running for it again.
And you're currently a practicing attorney?
Yes, I'm an attorney. I work from my home. I've had a practice for 16 years. I'm a construction lawyer. I mostly represent architects and engineers. I have a background in environmental law, and I've used it some in my practice. And we've been living here for 4 years, and my son is 10 years old. Is that good?
Yeah,
Great.
it's terrific. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you.
My name's Eric Eisenhower. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I lived in Europe for 35 years. My wife and I moved here 8 years ago. We love Cohasset, lovely town. I run big companies, a long list of organizations I've managed. I'm now retired. I'm a committed organic farmer. I teach organic rose cultivation. I lecture. I conduct seminars. I give speeches. I'm on the board of directors of Holly Hill Farms, and I am a conservationist. I believe very strongly in that, and I think I bring a horticultural approach to the Conservation Commission that benefits our implementation of the wetland and stormwater regulations.
Have you seen examples of when you've been on the board for a while where you've been able to use that background to come up with solutions to help doing, and to making adjustments and things that are needed in order to, conditions of permits and so forth?
I think we have, as a group, have made big progress in helping people select native species, the correct plants for the right hydrological and wetland situations, which certainly were not present in the initial proposals. So there's been a redirection there. We have lists of acceptable plants for wetland planting in the different situations, for coastal banks, which we didn't have before. So, yeah, I think we're better directed in those
So,
areas.
I'm talking about you individually, do you have skill background in this? Is this what your background is in, that you have knowledge in this area yourself?
I have knowledge in this area.
This is what you do, is that correct?
Well,
You
I'm
have a-
retired. I have studied horticulture. I'm a senior master gardener.
That's what I'm trying to get at,
Yeah.
that's what your background is, that's appropriate.
Yes.
Good.
Anyone else on the board?
And there's lists also. The list of plants is very helpful.
Yeah.
My name is
Natives.
Chris McFarland. I moved to Cohasset 3.5 years ago. I'm a landscape architect. I practice out of Boston. Been an associate member for 1 year now, and looking forward to continuing on.
As an associate.
For next.
For the next 2 weeks.
meeting.
Alex Coenis, thank you for the pronunciation correction. I moved to Cohasset 59 years ago as a little boy, and I've been on the commission for 2 terms now. The first term, we initiated the term limits that Diane expressed. I think it's from the previous presentation, which was very, very eye-opening to me about the number of homes that are going to be possibly built in the town. two in my neighborhood most recently that I never thought would be built. I think that the importance of the commission is even more dramatic going forward, to make sure that we obviously don't want to stifle any growth if people want to live here and contribute to society, but we do want to make sure it's done correctly. I think that's very important. So it's been an honor and a privilege, and it's certainly a big challenge to be on this commission, and I look forward to 3 more years if you see so fit.
You've been on for 3 years?
I've been on for actually 6.
6 years.
The first term.
The next 3 would be the
They
last 3 years?
grandfathered the
Yeah.
people
I
that
gotcha.
had been serving when they instituted.
So this next term would be your last term?
My final term.
Right,
Probably enough.
yeah.
But it's been, as I said, it's been a privilege and honor, and it's been great to know the people and interact with people, and to see the neighborhoods actually coming together when we discuss various issues, as we did last Thursday night,
Yep.
when almost all of Pleasant Street showed us for a hearing.
Right.
I like to see that. I think it's, the contribution is great. And I just want to give one plug to these 2 characters here. They've been there for about a year now, and they've been terrific. Really great contributions to it.
Good.
Steve?
So I just have a question for the three of you who have not served as voting members at this point, and one is a candidate. Based upon your immediate experience over the past year and what you know of the commission, what do you see as your central role?
Well, I'll start. I mean, the function of the Conservation Commission is to enforce the wetland protection and the stormwater management laws set forth by the state of Massachusetts. And I think that as voting members, our role is to look at what's being presented to us, to feel comfortable that what's being presented is taking all the steps necessary to produce a good, sound plan for the property which is being presented, and then to kind of use best judgment to determine whether or not it meets the criteria set out by the state regulation, and make sure that if it does not, that we do whatever we can to make sure that the plans are modified and changed to do exactly that.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. I think we received very professional submissions from the experts who are working on behalf of homeowners and the industry to forward projects. It's hard to say no, it's hard to see problems with them, but there are a lot of problems there. Our wetlands need to be defended to the utmost. I think with the proliferation of sewer connections and all that, it's going to be more and more difficult. But I think it's easy to approve projects. It's much more difficult to sit back and say, does it really make sense? Is this really what we want to do as a town? And I think I see that as one of our fundamental roles. And I think it's defending the environment, it's looking at the coverage of trees and clear cutting and lots of other issues that come into play. And it's never easy to say yes or no, but that's our job.
Okay. And Kathleen?
Well, I
Have one
haven't
follow-up.
served on the board, so in regard to my role, everything that has been said, I would agree with. And I'd also like to add that I was on the zoning board for 5 years, and I thought that ran wonderfully, and I learned a lot from the members that were on there for years, and also for the people that came before me. And I would hope that this board is like the zoning board, in that I found the members to be extremely helpful to the public in general to understand, because a lot of people don't really know what it is that they're doing there. All they know is that they have to be there. So I think that professionalism also has to extend to helping the Cohasset residents.
Okay, I do have a follow-up on this, and that is that, to take an observation that was made by Mr. Quinis and expand upon it just a bit. First of all, as you are aware, those 2 of you, 3 of you who have served on the commission for a bit, recognize that you're a regulatory body. And interestingly enough, based upon your comment, many of those developable parcels will abut wetlands or I should say do about wetlands, one way or another, you'll be called into question. And ultimately, you actually have a very fine line to walk, as you were beginning to express. One of those is upholding the laws to the best of your ability. The other, of course, is protecting the town, and I don't mean just from a judicious standpoint, but also from a legal standpoint, so that the decisions you make are defensible. And from that perspective alone, I ask each of you to reflect back on your time with the commission, or possibly your future time with the commission, and recognize that in a very real sense, you are probably the most critical phase of a potential home builder's pursuit. Okay? And it's very interesting to hear your approach that asks the commission to consider ways to assist an applicant in understanding the laws such that they might comply. So that's it for me.
May I just make one comment, just to follow up? And as Alex said, there a lot of work goes into the Conservation Commission. There's site visits, besides for the meetings, there's looking at the guidelines to make sure we understand what it is. But I would like to say that, just throw it out there for the record, that members of the Conservation Commission do exactly as you said, and are kind of that first line and kind of that big hurdle that a lot of homeowners have to get over. And recent cases before us suggest that that other groups in town, as they develop more guidelines for themselves, might benefit for us to get together with them, even though it's kind of additional labor. It would be useful to actually maybe talk about some of these things between different commissions, so that we as a community can strengthen the bylaws, et cetera, moving forward, so that we don't overstep bounds, but actually look ahead to the community as a whole and make sure that we're protecting it.
I think that integrates pretty well with an initiative that the town managers developed from a permitting standpoint, and I'd love to see it proceed.
And we're gonna get a town planner, which will help a lot, and that'll be one of their functions, is the coordination of the different regulatory silos.
Yeah, and I just wanted to jump on that because earlier in the meeting, we were discussing our FY 2018 goals, one of which is to have more communication among committees and boards and have more reporting, especially for the committees we appoint that aren't necessarily regulatory, but for them to communicate to the Board of Selectmen so that we understand what really the needs are or what the desires are in the community. So I think you'll see a lot of progress. Lisa is our HR director in town, and she's going to be spearheading a lot of that with trying to get committees and commissions and boards talking amongst themselves, so that we're all kind of understanding some of the pressure points in town. Just a couple of things on Conservation Commission. Two of us here, just by happenstance, happen to be married to conservation commissioners, and I think we both know that it's probably one of the hardest jobs, if not the hardest position to serve in this town, because it is so volatile at times, if you will. So I thank you all for all your time. The other great thing about an associate member is that they contribute and participate in the discussion and deliberations, so they don't have a voting, they're not able to vote, and I talked to Chris about that, just in terms of quorums, whether that's a state guideline or not, but from that point of view, they still contribute a lot, so that's very important. It's very important to kind of learn that world too, in terms of interpreting the Wetlands Protection Act and the stormwater bylaws. And then lastly, especially for Kathleen, just because she's new, and Paul hinted at it earlier, and we were talking about it at our last meeting with the planning board, but with these hearing boards, the people in the community have, usually hired an engineer and a landscape architect and a lawyer and everything else to get to a meeting, to present their work to the various hearing boards. And I just think it's very important to know that attendance is really important. It's a lot, and it's a tremendous commitment, but at the same time, we have to do the best for the community and for the applicants in terms of being present and making sure that meetings take place and that there's a quorum of, and as many people as possible to deliberate on all the matters, so. That's it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
So do you want a motion?
Yes, so I'd like a motion for approval for appointment Alex Coinos to a 3-year position on the Conservation Commission.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, 5-0. Next up is the 3-year appointment of Eric Eisenhower, Conservation Commission, for a 3-year term. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
And for a 1-year, associate 1-year term, Christopher McFarland, as for appointment.
Can you do them both at once?
No. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So they're both in?
Make a motion to
No, no,
appoint
no.
Kathleen.
No, 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 no.
Make a
Make
motion
a
to
motion
appoint
for
Kathleen.
appointment of Kathleen Heffernan for a 1-year term to the Conservation.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. All right. Got it.
Whether
Excellent.
or
Congratulations.
not
Thank you all
can
for your
appoint both
You
associate
can.
members at the time.
Future service. Oh, do you want to, yes, you can. You can also just put the motion. Thank you all. Next up is Harbor Committee appointment.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to explain what we've done here.
Okay.
Diane has graciously organized pre-meetings, and we had, how many applicants, Diane?
I think a total of 13.
13.
And then maybe 2 pulled out before
Yeah,
internet.
so we ended up screening and talking to 10 people. Through deliberation, we got down to 6 finalists, and we're asking the selectmen to review the 6 finalists. We've got 3 tonight, we're gonna have 3 at the next selectmen's meeting, and then we're gonna ask the selectmen to vote by ballot on 3 candidates for the finalist positions. Just so the folks watching know, the ballots are available to be reviewed by everybody, but we've decided to use ballots rather than, I don't want to say open outcry, but open voting to select the candidates. We just think it's a more civilized way to get around doing the evaluations and the voting.
Seems to me that ballot idea has come up in the past, and from my memory, our attorneys told us we can't do it that way.
Only if you don't sign the ballots. So everybody's got to identify who their ballot is and who their selection is. So what you'll get is a ballot with 6 selections on it and your name on top, and you'll pick 3 out of the 6. We'll ask Chris to do the tally, and we'll have our finalists out of
Well,
that.
personally, I don't have a problem with that, because that makes life easier in a number of ways, as you know, but I do think our attorney needs to go over that.
Gee, I hope we didn't make a mistake, because you
Make
would be
sure
hired
that-
if that were
make
the
sure the
case.
procedure-
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that our town manager was selected that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think the issue is, transparency, and as long as everybody signs their ballot and it's available to anyone who wants to take a look at the voting.
Because of public document.
It's a public document, and there's total
I
transparency.
don't have a problem, in fact, I kinda like it, I just think that we need to make
Yeah.
sure that that has the imprimatur of our attorney saying that's okay. So
Yeah, Chris,
who's gonna make sure
check
that's,
on that, see that.
just whatever the procedure is, make sure that's been run by our council, and then we'll do it. Personally, sounds fine to me.
Diane?
So just on that, I mean, I want to focus on tonight, which I think it makes most sense not to deliberate, to bring the 3 candidates up individually, have a brief conversation with them, and then kind of close it for the night, and then we'll have the 3 that aren't here this evening on July 11th.
And we'll,
I mean, I
I
would
would
like
ask,
to go through the ones that are already been recommended.
And then there are some representing, there are some that are representing different commissions that are part of the bylaw that, the Yacht Club, the Sailing Club, the Rec Commission, and the Fishing Fleet have made recommendations, and we could vote those tonight as a slate.
Yeah.
With those,
and are we gonna vote on the 11th then?
Yes.
Just so, because people have asked me that.
After we're done.
And just so it's clear to the public as well as everybody, out of these 6, these are the sort of at-large candidates, how many are we choosing?
3.
3, so we're gonna be voting on 3 out of 6, and that vote will be taken on the 11th.
Yes.
Correct.
So I'd like to see if we can settle the the first four that are there, and it would be the representatives of the Sailing Club, representative of the Yacht Club, representative of the Recreation Commission, and the Harbor Master, who is, by the bylaws and by the state law, ex officio member.
Does she have to be appointed?
She does, yeah.
Oh.
Well, it's technically, you're right, ex officio member would not necessarily need to be appointed.
It's just by whoever happens to be in that job.
So should we just consider that, want me to just,
Well, we can just say Harbor Master, appoint the Harbor Master to the committee, or mention that ex officio member is the Harbor Master.
Okay, I move that we appoint Sean Keneally as a representative of the Cohasset Sailing Club, Joseph Curley as a representative of the Cohasset Yacht Club, and Kim Mulcahy as a representative of the Recreation Commission. And also note that Lori Gibbons, the Harbor Master, serves on the committee as a ex officio member.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Question, were the fishermen,
Yeah, so the two fishermen,
So there was one,
There are two candidates that were given preference. One candidate, I would, could we defer this till the 11th? There's some things that have to get straightened out, it's organizational stuff.
okay. So we can delay that.
We'll bring that up on the 11th. and
so we'll do the 3 candidates and 2 fishermen?
Yes.
So next up would be the 3 candidates for quick interview for the Harbor Committee. Of the 6 that have been reviewed, the 3 were recommended by, for review. George McGolder, Lisa Hewitt-Dick, and Fran Collins.
Come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for coming. Thanks for putting your name up and willing to serve and willing to put your hat in the ring. So just introduce yourselves and.
Sure. Hi, good evening. I'm Lisa Hewitt-Dick. I live at 27 Parker Ave. More now, or?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, a little background.
Let's see.
For the
Mike and I have
people
lived
listening
in
at home.
town for 24 years. We've lived on Parker Ave, just short of 14. He says I can't move in another 10 years because he's done with us moving. The reason I've applied for this position is I think we're in a very important time in this town's history, and in this, especially when I sit and I listen to the presentation that was made earlier about the developable lots in this town. I was a former member of the town zoning board. I am the general counsel for statewide public defender's office. I think my background in land use and public policy, my relationships, I've lobbied and been involved in public policy for over 30 years. I'm an abutter to the ocean. I'm a neighbor. I have belonged to the CYC, the Sailing Club, CMI. I have a good relationship and a good knowledge of most of the organizations that we will be looking at from the list that was presented to us from, I think, AEG. Mike and I think, have a front row seat to what goes on in the harbor. I see the challenges and the opportunities of things that can be done in the future. Public access is phenomenally important to me. I think that we've seen in just the 14 years that I've lived on the harbor directly, the increase in the use, which is fantastic, and it's wonderful that we live in such a fantastic little town. It's a gem, but it's a fragile gem. And there is lots of questions and need for future planning between the economic issues, the commercial fleet needs versus people trying to launch their boat, the fishermen trying to do, make a living versus how much access are we going to allow for other things. I think Harbor Master Lori is a wonderful individual. She does a great job in running the harbor, but I think there's a lot of issues that she needs support on. That, and maybe some of those issues I'm not even aware of yet, but I think they need to be looked at. There's also, the use of, the Yacht Club versus the Sailing Club versus CMI versus CSC. I can see listed there, but obviously they have a major use in the harbor. I don't know if there's any particular questions you'd like to ask me?
Why don't we go through everybody, we can come back and
Okay.
ask questions.
Right?
Yeah, I'm Francis Collins. I live at 404 South Main Street. I've been in town for over 70 years. I grew up here, went to school here, graduated from high school here. I'm a professional mariner. I'm retired from active seagoing. I now teach at Mass Maritime Academy. I do a cruise with them, training the new generation of mariners. I started out lobster fishing here as a kid. I had a lobster fishing business all through high school. When I got through home from sea voyages, I used to go dragging on boats out of Situate. So I'm pretty familiar with what goes on in the harbor and what goes on in the waters around here. I've also been involved in marine construction. I've also been involved with as I just said, fisheries. I live on the marsh up in the Gulf. I only have direct access to the ocean as well. My entire career has been around the maritime world. I've had senior executive positions in New York and the maritime world. I got tired of commuting to New York, moved back to our home in Cohasset. We never sold and went back to sea again. I think that I know what Cohasset Harbor was from my early days here as a kid. I know what it is now, and I have a pretty good idea what it can be. And I think there's a whole lot of things that need to be addressed in Cohasset Harbor that could make the harbor an attractive, viable, economically successful place of operation for the town of Cohasset and its citizens. You know, we used to have 2 places to buy fuel in the harbor. We used to have a place where you could buy bait if you want to take your kids fishing to get sea worms and clams. Don't have that anymore. We used to have a donut shop, right, built out over at the head of the cove. We used to have the shack where you could have a not too bad a meal. You had a couple of nice restaurants, Hugo's and Kimball's. You had the Seahorse, where you could buy a sandwich and a milkshake. You had Annie Grassie's, where you could buy a grilled cheese sandwich and a loaf of bread. You had Buffalo's, where you could buy a 6-pack of beer or a bottle of wine to take on your boat. There was lots and lots of infrastructure around that harbor that supported the harbor, made it an interesting, fun place to be. What do we have today? Not much. So that needs to be looked at, it needs to be addressed. What can we do? Is there some land that the town can buy to develop? Is there some things that we can do to attract people? Can we talk to the Roy family and somehow manage to acquire the boatyard? And perhaps set up a fueling station down there. Used to be a big long pier went off the boatyard out to deep water where they could bring the boats in. That washed away in the blizzard of '78. I could go on and tell you about the harbor. I can tell you what's on the bottom of the harbor. I can tell you what lives in the harbor. I have a great affinity for the harbor. I know, since I started out lobster fishing, and Gail told me back in high school, if you're just gonna stay fishing, I'm not gonna marry you. So I went off, says, go on, 53 years later, we're still married. Well, maybe it's only 26 and a half, because I was way out. Anyway.
Oh, so that's the secret.
But the point is that I have a great affection and affinity for the harbor. I know all the fishermen. I understand what their wants and needs are. I understand that some of their concerns aren't being met. We have a harbor master, Laurie Gibbons, who does a great job, you know, and there's some people complain about Laurie, and I say, that's great, because if someone's complaining about you, she's probably doing a good job, and she is very much so doing a good job. But we have to bring all these disparate interests together and let everybody work together, and let's develop the harbor so that it can be fun. Where can we park cars? Do we have a place to park cars for people to come down there? Are we going to be totally overwhelmed by wedding receptions? You know, we have to make accommodations so that we can use what little harbor we have. One, for instance, has an active, two marinas. They make a pile of money. Other harbors do too. Can we have a marina in Cohasset Harbor? I think we can. I spoke with John Garces 40 years ago when he was going to tear the Kimball's down. I said, let's put a marina in there. We put square things like pigeonholes and stick boats in them. Nobody had ever thought of that, done it before. You know, now they're late and a dollar short with me, but.
You're on the boat.
Well, I mean, the point is that we have had opportunity, where the town could have bought the Cox Estate for $100 million not too many years ago. Imagine how we could have developed that. An attractive development, nothing gaudy, nothing flashy, over the top, but we could have done that. So what we could have done is past. We can't. Now we have to look at what can we do now to make our harbor attractive and make people want to go there and make it a comfortable, welcoming place. And I think that my background basically lived here so far all my life. I'd make me a pretty good candidate to help restructure Cohasset Harbor and bring it into the future.
Thanks.
Yes, Frank.
Thank you.
My name's George McGoldrick. I live at 107 Border Street, and I vote for Franny. We've been in town, Mayor and I have been in town for 25 years. I've served on a number of different committees, mostly committees that look at a specific problem and try to solve the problem. So back in almost 20 years ago, the Police and Fire Committee, where we looked for a new police and fire emergency station, couldn't find the support or the funds to do it, so we fixed what was there, got some gender-neutral bathrooms and bedrooms, and fixed what we could at the time. Rolled that into other things such as the Downtown Revitalization Committee, worked on the bylaw committee for a number of years. Outside of the town, specifically the town government, doing things like the turf field project, which I think was a great public-private partnership, where we took up a problem that we thought we could solve privately. We couldn't do it, so we brought the town in, and I think we came out with a product during the recession that the whole town is able to benefit from. So my background in commercial real estate, looking at projects, trying to figure out what to do with them, turn the box a little bit. Some success stories included the Custom House in downtown Boston, converting a vacant building into one of the first urban timeshares. The Black Rock Quarries became the Black Rock Residential and Country Club. So I think what I bring to the table is able to look at things a little differently and try to find uses for them that benefit the town in this case. For example, the Mill River buildings, as Franny mentioned, I've talked to the broker on them. They don't want to sell it right away. They want to perhaps keep it for whoever buys the Royer estate. But there's certainly ways that we can find grant money and CPC money and individual private funds to make that a town resource. Excuse me, I'm running out of liquid here. The Bellarmine estate, is also something that may be coming on the market. Another resource along the harbor that the town should look at. And in Freddie's example of not being able to get the original Royer estate, maybe that's something we can look hard at. And again, my background is looking at things like that and finding the resources to achieve those things. We live on the river, on the Gulf River Association. Twice a day, the harbor flows in front of my backyard and flows out again. So I'm very concerned with the environmental impact. And the association has had some good success recently in bringing back attention to the river and ensuring that no clear cutting and other issues that have been going on happens. In fact, we were just able to stop a 20,000 square foot clear cutting. And that was in front of conservation 2 weeks ago. We were able to raise the issues. That's probably not the best idea. And the applicant ended up pulling his application. So the environmental conservation issues by living on the river is important to me. The economic development of the harbor is important. And I think I can bring that kind of experience to the table. I find it ironic that we're bidding over a position on a volunteer board. Usually we get dragged in, kicking and screaming.
It's a good thing.
But if not me, the other candidates are absolutely well qualified to do this.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to mention that, this is a very important committee in town. It's been around for a while, but it's going to be reinstituted and reformed, and there's a lot of support from state monies in town and planning that is going to be making the harbor potentially a new harbor. So when you consider all the candidates, think of it from the long-term point of view, think about what their talents are, how well they can get things done, how well they're working together, overall experience. And so I'll go to you three. I'm going to ask the question that they asked me when I was running for school committee and running for Board of Selectmen. Will you have the time? Is what.
I will have the time. I'm a I have a full-time job, I work in the city of Boston, but like, I think any other professional here who has a full-time job and is still working, you just plan. And if it's, and I think if this committee is only going to be successful if they plan and they have a tight schedule and have a board reporting deadlines and accountability for what they're expected to produce.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have been on this committee now for about 7 years, and I have been to exactly 0 meetings, so, because that's all we've had.
That's right.
100%
Yeah,
attendance.
100% times 0 is 0, actually.
Don't claim the chairmanship.
Yeah. So, it's, I basically am usually 3 days a week at Mass Maritime, so it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so I got plenty of time to do whatever has to be done. And if you want to be on a committee that does something that is important to you, you're gonna find time.
I own a local business in Hingham. It's 15 years old, basically runs by itself. That's my only business at this point in time, so I've got plenty of time. And I'm not serving on any other committees at this time. I'm on a couple of boards, like the Cohasset Working Dog Foundation, and Gulf River, and a couple others that meet maybe 6 times a year. So I have full time to devote to this board.
Okay. Anyone else?
If you could, each of you sort of answered this question, you've somewhat covered it in your comments anyways, but obviously we're taking on this effort because we're relooking at the harbor area and we're looking for it to improve it or change it. And I know you may not have, should not probably have fully defined all of your thoughts and so forth, but could you give me a feeling, if you could look out, say, 10 years, and what it is that you might want to see that, or how that harbor would be changed and improved? Maybe we can start with you, Lisa.
Well, I think a lot of these issues I brought up in my initial interview, and some of these have been highlighted by some of the other applicants here this evening. I believe that the Marine Railroad area, as far as getting gas pumps in there, would be very important for the commerce and just the public access to and the usability of the harbor. I would like to see more access for people to be able to park. I mean, I'm there in Parker Ave. The poor people who want to use the harbor, want to launch boats, are constantly trying to find some place to park. That's a major issue. That would be something I would like to see. I think we should be looking at every single piece of the harbor and see if there's any way to address some of all the issues that have been looked at. I would like to see the commercial fleet feel like they are being heard, and that we make it so that we don't direct so much of the activities to just a casual May to late October user at the risk or at the peril of individuals who are trying to make a living on the ocean. So I think I would like to see a plan put in place. I would like to see a well thought out plan put in place, and I would like to see us possibly get some grants. I have experience in grant writing. I was a peer reviewer for the U.S. Justice Department for many years, and I wrote and I critiqued and submitted grants. So I think that I think we're going to be very surprised at where we end up, because I think we need to have a lot of input from different groups, and right now we have not had that input from all different groups. So that would be one of the initial threshold things, to do that sort of canvassing of the individuals and have everybody at the table. I think I'm talented at doing that. I have had, in my role as general counsel of a statewide agency, I have to deal with conflicting people, groups and conflicting needs all the time of various people with limited resources, and having a lot of people draw on those resources and make everyone feel like they've been heard. Maybe you're not with them at the end of the day, you can't be with them in the actual decision, but they feel like at least they've been heard, and whatever you're deliberating on has been reviewed properly.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't mention, I've served on several boards, and I'm on the Town Hall Reconstruction Committee right now, and on the Historic Commission, and I think you and I must have been on that same thing. Was that the second time we did the fire station, or the first time?
1999, 2000.
No, I was on the one before
The early
that.
one there.
Yeah, the one before that, so. I've been volunteering in town my whole life. I used to show the movies at the community center on Saturday afternoons. That was one of my volunteer jobs. But anyway, back to the harbor. There are places in the harbor where we can put in more boats. Room for more boats can be made. you know, with floating docks and finger piers, we can do that. That can be done, that's something that can be done right now. Laurie Gibbons has a great plan for that, and I think that, you know, we'll be talking about that. So whether I make the committee or not, you'll be hearing from me. Years ago, we had wooden piers in Cohasset Harbor. We had wooden piers that came off from Border Street. And schooners would come in, they'd load everything from granite to molasses, whatever, fish land. We have one of the biggest mackerel ports thing. So we can build some of those wooden piers back out again, possibly over the, you know, that could be a marina area. There's a lot of things can be done. One of the biggest problems we have in Cohasset Harbor right now, it's owned by one person. And it's been owned by one person for a long, long time. That really stymies any kind of development. I remember the time when Peter Roy, and he's been a great person here in town, but I remember the time he painted the toadstool, you know, at the Lawrence Wharf, painted it black and white. Wait a minute, where did this come from? It was always red trim and plain old cement things. He took it on himself, that was his color scheme of his harbor, and it was gonna be painted black and white. Well, we all squawked about it, and that got changed. But, you know, for all the good things he'd done, that was the one little thing that was sort of rankled us a little bit. But if we can get control of some other parts of that, there's a nice big piece of land where Paulie Seagrill used to be. Now, where is Paulie Seagrill? Who knows where Paulie Seagrill used to be? Not one of you. Right next to Andy Grassie's. Where was Andy Grassie's? I don't know. That's the building that's fallen down right next to the place where you can get your hair cut or your trousers shortened, next to the American Legion. But there's a lot of land with Paulie Seagrill. That's been torn down for years and years. That's a piece of land that the town could buy. Some people, there's still a Salvador family, somebody in Pennsylvania owns it. You know, haven't been able to track them down yet, but, you know, so there's things that can be done. There's incrementally, things can be done, and if they get done incrementally, they'll build on them. The enthusiasm will build, and we can get more stuff done.
So as we've all talked about, the Mill River is the most viable piece of property that's going to be for sale. I've spoken with the broker representing Mr. Roy. They'll take $2.5 million for it today, but with the restriction on maritime use, it doesn't make sense for an outside person, an investor, to come in and put, I'd love to see a donut shop there too, but it doesn't make sense for an outside investor. It does make sense though for a town to get some grant money, to get some CPC money, CPA money, and come in and buy it and make it a viable use and make it a more active use, as we all have seen it. One of the ideas we could use with Mill River, Mr. Roy's broker said that they were gonna kind of wait to see who was gonna buy the Oaks, and then offer that parcel of Mill River to the person who buy the Oaks, so they could quote unquote put all their toys. And my suggestion would be, when and if they do sell the Oaks, is to approach that person and have them gift the Mill River to the town for a tax break. It's not a tax break, the town would only lose the incremental value of the taxes it receives now on Mill River, which is approximately $18,000. But they could receive a $3 to $4 million federal tax break. So it would make sense financially for the person to buy the Oaks, if they didn't want that property, because he has enough land over at the Oaks, to maybe gift it to the town and receive a huge tax benefit from it. So those are the kind of ideas that we could use and formulate and get land back and usage back for the town.
Just one quick thing is, it's not dispositive to me, but are you all active boaters and do boat in the harbor and to us landlubbers?
To any boats in the
So you-
How many
so you-
boat- all right, how many boats you have, Randy? Come on.
So you all, that's all I.
There's actually 5. The sailboat's going in tomorrow.
Oh, it isn't in yet?
No, those take a while.
No, good.
Thank you all. I just want to say, I mean, as you'll see, we have 6 great candidates, and the one good thing is, this is a public committee, they're gonna be doing a lot of work. We have a harbor grant, we're gonna have a consultant on board, and whoever isn't on the committee is certainly welcome to be at the meetings, as I know many of us will be, because this really is a very important part of our planning for Cohasset's future.
I mean, this is a real gem in the town, and it's gonna be super if we can get something accomplished out of it, which I think is what the board and what the committee is all set to do.
It's,
Yeah, we saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just sent to
On
us.
the way over,
Hot off the press.
on the way over, yeah, there's someone else's.
So there's some work to do.
Yeah.
Have ideas about
It's down the water.
I heard he's gonna give it to the town.
There's, just.
Any other comments?
Yes.
No.
To me.
Yeah.
I found your comment, George, about the competition for the role to be spot on. And it's really heartwarming to see the capabilities, interest, and passion that is coming forward with the three of you, and I know are represented by the other three candidates as well. It's rare that we get to a point where you say, well, you can't make a bad choice, and I really don't think we could on this committee. The ideas that you just spit out at us off the, I recognize they're not off the cuff, but they are instantaneous thoughts that come about, are helpful, worthwhile, but most of all, they define a level of interest and thinking from each of you that is, as I said, it's heartwarming and refreshing. So thank you very much for your time tonight, and in advance, thank you for any services that you deliver.
Any other comments?
No, I just want to say, so tonight, everybody hopefully took notes. We'll do the next set on the 11th, and then we're going to vote right after that group. And again, everybody's extremely qualified. It was very hard to get down to 6 people. If you're not picked, I would highly recommend you stay active in the group and attend all the meetings and get involved anyway. All it means is that you can't vote.
You can still have a voice. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great candidates.
Jack and I did such a good job.
Next up is the open space and recreation. There are 2 positions available, only one has applied, Richard Karoff, for the open space and recreation committee.
I move.
Is there a motion to appoint him to the open space and recreation?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Just a
Aye.
quick, I'm
Oh,
sorry, can I ask a question?
discussion.
Is it a 3-year appointment? Do we know? Or is this
Yes,
for?
he's being reappointed to it.
3-year appointment?
3 year.
Okay.
3-year, point of information, 3-year appointment. All in favor?
Aye.
And registrar of voters, Diane Benson, I believe that is a 3-year as well, correct?
She's existing in the position now.
Yes.
Yeah, she's very
Yeah.
good. 3-year?
Don't know.
I'm trying to find it.
I believe 5, yeah, I think it is.
Ask for a motion to approve registrar of voters, Diane Benson, as a reappointment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Did the Wheel River thing kind of fall off the agenda?
No, it's
Right here.
It's right here.
You got it
Oh.
on the
that's
summary
not-
sheet.
I didn't put it
That's
on
not on
the
the agenda, though.
No, it's not.
That'll be done next week then.
Have we done next week?
There's no competition.
Yeah, we have to.
Rely on for the
Okay.
both.
So we're up to selectmen updates.
I'm all set, thank you.
Diane?
I'm all set, thanks.
Steve?
Yeah, I just have one thing. Chris, you had sent me an email the other day with respect to some changes around the harbor. Originally, a resident had spoken to me about what he had seen and his wife had seen as an excess of new lighting, which actually was disturbing to them. And you had written me an email explaining a few things, and then pointing out, as a matter of fact, that this was actually included in our packet for 6/13 meeting. And I hadn't seen it, then I realized, of course, I hadn't seen it because it was page 185 of 200. And it wasn't on the agenda.
No, it was just,
All
it
right.
was just for information.
Well, no, I just bring it up because it's important for my fellow colleagues. We now have 4 360-degree view, high-definition Zoom cameras with infrared capabilities, with uplinks that essentially bring that surveillance to an availability for the Coast Guard and as a unit of Homeland Security to any other related agency. Okay?
Can you?
Interestingly enough, it's all laid out for you,
Yep.
except the contract isn't complete.
Well,
And,
we'll have that final.
and it has to be signed by the Board of Selectmen. But the install's already done. And the install, in order to have been done, would have had to have been asked for, requested as a grant, and then siting had to have been located, had to have been approved by FEMA, right? So this has been in the works for a while, and all I want to know, it doesn't have to be tonight, I'd like to know the genesis. I'd like to know how the decision-making was done. I'd sure like to know, first of all, why we need to look like a commercial harbor with lighting, when in fact we've got the camera capabilities that have heat-sensing devices, all right? And I'd like to know how it's going to be used and who's monitoring it. And by the way, why was this a decision that requires BoS signature, and one of which I do not recall ever being asked to consider?
I can just very quick.
Yeah,
No, so
again.
the lighting issue has been addressed.
What is the lighting issue? I'm
Well,
on the outside.
there've been lights around the harbor that haven't
We
functioned.
shouldn't be talking about this without posting it.
No,
I mean,
that's
we
what I said,
really
I just
need
want to
to
make,
post
I want to
this.
make certain it makes the agenda. I don't want to have to get into it
Yeah.
at the moment. I'm letting you know that it's an item of interest, and Mr. Chairman, can we place it on the agenda?
We can, I mean, it is under selectmen comments, so you can certainly rebut from that.
No. My point in is not to cut off Chris's conversation, but rather, if there's a question with respect to whether or not we should go into it in any depth or contemplation, I'm quite all right with that.
Okay.
I just want to make sure it makes an agenda. Okay?
Chris?
If you'd rather just wait for another day, that's fine with me. I mean, this was distributed for informational purposes. To my knowledge, the board did not have to approve this. I know what the contract says, Steve, but there was, as I understood it, it didn't have to go in front of the board for approval. This was a Port of Boston initiated port security grant. The jurisdiction runs, and it's a program that runs from the New Hampshire line to Plymouth, including every harbor.
It's not a requirement, and it's a
No,
policy issue.
It's absolutely not a requirement.
Whoever monitors this can watch an amorous couple on their boat in the dark of night through heat sensing capabilities. It's facial recognition capabilities, so your 20-year-old kid having a beer on Bassing's Beach is identifiable.
The goal of the project, as I understand it, was to have a unified coastal interlocking security just aimed at working harbors, not private beaches and things like that. At the same time, in parallel, nothing specifically to do with this project, there were some the town has acquired the streetlights. A number of non-working lights all around town. A couple of spotlights happened to be on the harbor, they were reactivated.
We've never had sodium vapor lights. I've been here 25 years.
They may not have been this, well, here's the issue, so the sum of the issue. I've had them turned off. I want to understand better why we need them, what they're for. I understand that there were some safety issues. We don't like the docks. We have 5 docks around the harbor. We don't like them.
Did you know these were being installed? When were you notified that this was being done?
Let me get a full update for everybody. The harbor master has been part of this program. She gave me a quick update that there was a program coming. And I said, okay, I'd like to get me some information and we'll see where we go.
But this is a capital project, number one. Number two, it is. It's a capital project.
We haven't put any dollar. We have
Doesn't matter.
$0.
Our capital project policies do not require the funding to be identified by the town. Number two, this without a doubt is policy. Okay? And
It's a public safety issue too.
Yeah.
Was public safety pulled into this program?
If we're going to have a more in-depth conversation, I am no more prepared to have that.
This is a bad process. I just want to let the other selectmen know it's a
I
lot
mean,
of
this
bad
came up-
process.
But this came up from selectmen comments, so
So
certainly we
I'm
can
happy
place it
to have a
on.
bigger
Let's do it on
conversation
the-
about
let's
it.
do it on the agenda.
And by the way, just to be clear, this whole packet went to all of you.
it did.
And
Thank you.
I received no comments from anyone.
You're right.
So,
And
and
You
again,
ever pointed out to us.
I
Ever.
do not point out, I apologize.
And I was at a public,
I
I was at a
apologize.
public festival with you, and, look, I mean, if we want to get into this,
Let's put this.
Let's
I'll
put
go
it-
right now and go
let's-
into it.
This is
No,
not,
let's
this
put
is
it on-
not,
let's
this
put it on an
Jack,
agenda in a
I'm either
future
being
meeting,
defensive nor aggressive.
because we were gonna have
There's
to
a-
post it if you wanna get into.
Yeah, we need to post it.
There's a lot of information that goes out in the packet that's informational, okay? right? There's a lot of things that happen informationally. They're not all reported on. I'm happy to report on them, and they're put in there, so people have questions, they can raise them back. There was no effort to hide anything, no effort to cover anything, to keep anything under the covers.
So we'll post it on a
Let's
future
put it on a
agenda.
future
We'll
agenda,
put it on
just
a
to get
future
more
agenda.
information.
Yeah, just, Paul, for full disclosure,
Yep.
I did not see it in the packet, because I'm pretty sure I fell asleep.
Did
at
anybody
page-
else see it in the
Page
packet? I saw it.
122.
Which packet was it?
613.
Because
Oh, this
it's
year?
starting
There
from,
was 2 meetings ago.
starting from
Now,
Portland all the way
two
down
weeks
to Plymouth, yes.
But in
I
any-
read
in
it.
any
It was
case-
Homeland Security was the one who was funding it. It's designed for port security. After 9/11, it began this, and it's been going on for the last
The contract-
15 years. So this is, yes,
The
I did read
contract,
it, and I,
the contract included, by the way, is missing 2 pages. All right?
Yes.
Okay.
I
and-
gave you the information that I had at the time.
Okay, fair enough, I'm just making the point. So in.
And
in
who
this-
signed that
in-
contract?
No, well, that's the point. It
No,
requires.
you do not have a
it
final
requires
version of it.
Can we
executive
see an
signature.
executed copy too before the
Yeah,
next
I
meeting?
want to, I'll pull together anything that we need,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna ask for more information from
There's-
the.
While the intent of this, and this is my concern to my colleagues, while the intent of this may be port security, its use is highly open-ended, and the feed, as you'll read in the contract, while it goes to the harbor master, masking gets done at that level. In other words, that's a security clearance. Our harbor master is not even charged with as a public safety officer. Okay?
Meaning she can't carry
Has
a
no
gun,
enfor-
she can't make
no
arrests.
enforcement power from that perspective. Second, the feed is automatically shared and monitored real time by Coast Guard and any other related agencies. Anybody remember what the Coast Guard is now part of?
Treasury, oh no,
Homeland Security now, right? Related agencies to Homeland Security? My point in all of this is a policy issue from my perspective, and I don't know that that's debatable. So, there you go. Okay?
Just so I can add, when I read this, the only thing I made a note of was that we were supposed to sign it. So whenever we have this conversation, I wanna know if we have to sign it, and if not, why not? That's all.
It's only
We'll place it
executable
on a
according to
future-
that contract by either by the executive, either the mayor or the board of selectmen.
Right.
I will double check and have more information for the next meeting, or whatever else.
we'll put it on a future agenda.
If we may, because this is real time and it exists now, can we please move it
I
to the
do
next
not
agenda?
know that the system is active.
That, which is just fine, because I prefer that it, but not.
No, I understand,
not-
but I don't know that it is active. I don't know that it's active.
I
We'll place it on a
respectfully
future agenda.
request
Yep.
that it's the next agenda.
Can we do it on the next agenda, the
If
time?
that's what you'd like to do, it'll be on the
We
next.
can do the next. Jack, anything?
No, I'm good, thanks.
The only thing I have is a triathlon executed well. I don't think there was any major
I
complications.
actually do have something to point
Oh,
out,
go ahead.
I could pass along to public safety. This weekend was also the member guest tournament, a 4-day member guest tournament at the Cohasset Golf Club, which is adjacent to the bicycle route, okay? And which passes down Cedar Street. There are 2 passageways across Cedar Street for golf carts and people, all right? One is outbound, meaning going on the plane, the hole's outbound, and it heads from Cohasset to Hingham. It's at that very sharp turn just by the dog pound, okay? The other one is passing on to Cedar Lane, very near the maintenance sheds and the entrance to the RTF. And that's going inbound from Hingham to Cohasset, okay? Both of them are fairly blind to a fast-moving cyclist, okay? And I make the point because there ought to be some indication in future events where you have either a cycling event or the tri passing through, that you have some controls there. I saw 2 or 3 occasions where there were some fairly close calls. The cyclist has no chance if you've got a slow-moving golf cart.
They're going really fast down there, like 30 miles an hour.
So,
And there's also a potbelly
Did the-
pig that runs
Did
into the
the
street.
golf club
Those-
mention
And
that
the goats.
Those are
Did
goats.
the golf club mention to their
I hate to see one of them
No,
get run over.
there was no word of it, and that was the other
No
piece, is
call
there was no
disputes.
communication.
So perhaps,
Three or four
Yeah.
goats.
St. John has a
Maybe
couple of
if you know it
goats.
in the golf.
Yeah,
club,
Maybe
let
not
them
during
know.
the summer, but.
No, I-
It's
I-
yearly
I-
event
days
so that
ago.
they're aware of it.
I've already talked to the manager, but I think this is also part of the coordination that ought to take
Sure.
place between,
Combination
All
of,
parties.
it's.
Definitely.
I don't think it's
No.
just the town's job.
No, I know, it's part of the golf course and letting people know, because it is a yearly event and it's been going on the same time for the last 10 years, so,
Yeah.
yep.
There
just
was
for-
actually an incident on Cedar, because I was up there,
I
and
heard
I
that.
saw the,
Oh, it happened on Cedar.
no, just, there was someone who just, I think, I don't know if their bike broke or something, it wasn't anything bad. But I did see the carts, and I'm like, wow, it's kind of busy. But it's a point that I'll bring back.
Okay, so the triathlon, I believe, was the 11th year
Yep.
at this point, and it went off. I don't think there were any major complications, unless maybe there was a golf cart that.
One bike
No,
crash and
Nope, yeah,
Nope,
I was on
good.
kayak patrol.
good.
It was damn cold.
Water was freezing.
And the South Shore Hospital was given the Gold Award from the American Heart Association for cardiac care.
Wow.
One of the few in the.
How'd that
Commonwealth.
happen?
Congratulations.
It was 8 quarters in a row of having very good cardiac care, so.
And how is that defined?
Nobody reporting dying on the table.
Dr. Schubert, that's how it
45 minutes.
That's what I was waiting for.
Dr. Schubes.
But it's one of the few in
Cholesterol
Commonwealth.
fighter.
So it is further reinforces how South Shore Hospital has really grown in the last 30 years.
Congratulations, Paul.
Congratulations.
Well, it's more from the hospital point of view. It's really a group effort from the hospital that's done a great job in the last 20 years.
But we only care about you.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right. And
My dog is calling me.
Town manager.
town manager update.
Does anyone have any questions on the finances through May? We're 1 month out. Town's at almost 100% of revenue, water's over 100% of revenue, and sewer's just about at 100% of revenue.
Congratulations.
There are still some bumps, but I think things are gonna come in okay. We're still, we'll have to watch the last month. They've been selling stickers like hotcakes downstairs, which is good. And so that'll, I think, bring up the phone number.
Just gonna wait a few more.
The expense on water and sewer, I think, are okay. Plus, we talked about the savings of the refinancing at last meeting. Large chunk of that's gonna go to water anyway, so they'll be starting to see savings in the fiscal year we're about to go into. The town savings is pretty de minimis, because we have a fairly small amount. But, and sewer will save some money as well, so, and they'll see us.
The savings are from principal and interest payments.
Correct, the refi has dropped their net interest cost, so.
By a
start-
lot, Chris, do you know?
It's $900,000 over the life of the issue, so another.
What was that, 10-year note?
It's about 13 years left, I think, so.
Yeah, so that's a lot.
Yeah, they gotta see some real
Yeah.
savings, and it's not, level, it goes up and down, but, it'll be enough to make a difference in their budget, I think, this next year, which is good.
So we'll be 100% of budget basically for the fiscal year when we close the books. Very close.
Above that.
Yeah, I think we're, yes.
Just, I hate to pick on line items, but I was surprised with electricity. Electricity
Yeah,
seemed way up.
Well, what happened is, remember, we had the senior center that wasn't in the budget for most of the year, right? That's why it spiked. So we had to catch up on the payment after town meeting.
Okay, so you
That's the
think
reason-
that's
well,
showing there?
Because they didn't bill us for months, so it kind of left at the end. We're also paying off some of these retrofit projects. The ones that were pre-grant are, they were paying for over a 3-year period.
Yeah.
So some of our expenses went up, even though the electricity costs went down, the difference is not, you're not seeing the savings yet.
LED lighting.
And by the way, we did win $177,000 from the Green Community Grant.
Yeah, I was
which-
just gonna
Oh,
say, I
you know,
totally forgot about that.
For, what's it for?
It's our second year Green Communities grant.
But how's it gonna be used, do you know the
I
money?
was gonna-
How's it gonna be used, Chris, the money?
There are 6 identified projects that were part of the original Green Communities application, and they were updated. The biggest ones are at the middle high school in terms of the HVAC. And it'll say, and then there's a project at Deer Hill. It all has to do with environmental controls, and there's also some work at the police and fire station. Here it is. Thank you, I totally, I was kind of bringing this in. Here.
Help you out.
This is they don't big checks, they don't do big checks anymore, they just do little certificates. We have a call coming up on the details, and it should fully fund that, plus some of we get National Grid savings credits, because it reduces their usage as well as we reduce ours. It should mean to about $250,000 on fully funded projects, so which is good. And this year it has to be very front loaded to the schools, because that's where we spend most of our utility money. Middle high school is the biggest public building we have, and I will, once we finish with the review of how the project will be implemented, I'll report back as to what we're going to be, what the net savings. But again, the schools will be able to start seeing those savings again in the fiscal year we're about to go into. So.
Just to add, there was a ceremony at the State House, and there were, I don't know, maybe 170 green communities, and every single one of them was represented. Had sent somebody to pick up the award, and the representatives of Joe Reckons.
Yeah, Diane was our representative for this.
So it was.
She was in Boston. Weren't that easy.
Well, except as I said, I was dressed like a farmer. I had to stop at Marshall's and get an outfit so I could go there. I had worked late the night before, and I just went in to clean my office.
Anything else on our numbers at this point? So what I just handed out to you was a draft of a calendar for a potential special town meeting in the fall. You don't have to set a date tonight. I'm just bouncing off a potential date of October 16th. What that would mean is that we'd have to start work in about a month. Actually, not a month, in about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's it. It's an aggressive schedule, but that's how it would set up.
Do we have a lot of business to do at this special town
No,
meeting?
most of what we have to do is, the routine, some budget transfers and allocating some of the free cash.
Yeah, closing the books.
And then,
Presenting
the town meeting project. That's the
Town
most
hall.
meaty thing at the moment. I'm sorry. The town hall project for a town meeting is the meatiest thing, which is still, obviously, there's a ways to go before
Yeah.
it's fully ready. But that's the guide point. So if that's out here for your thoughts. So, and this is, by the way, 2 reasons to circulate this. One is this is a draft calendar for potential annual town meeting on April 30th. This was developed. This is a working draft that was discussed at the long-range planning group. It's a more comprehensive calendar. But it just, again, this is just for discussion purposes at this point. So take a look at it, think about it. Again, the date of October 16th, you have to vote on potential for next week if you want to get it set. But again, you don't have to vote on it. You at least have to tell me it's set. You wouldn't call the meeting until August, and there's a 7-day clock from when you call the meeting for citizen petitions, and it closes. And then we'd have the meeting. This one, you wouldn't actually call until January, but this would be the calendar. One of the key elements in there, just to think about, is things we talked about with the long-range planning group, is to do a series of, and they don't have to be these dates, I just picked up because they happen to be on Tuesdays, that we haven't set the calendar yet for next year. To do joint meetings, for example, I'd have the selectmen and the advisory committee jointly together talking with the water and the sewer boards, as opposed to having them do a dog and pony show and take up multiple nights. And the same thing on the school budget, have advisory and the selectmen in the same room at the same time with the school committee. And the same thing with capital budget, when they're ready for their report, to do it jointly. And to perhaps do a advisory raise that they have goal setting or a reassessment meeting, I guess, last Thursday. And they talked about doing a joint meeting with you folks in the fall, talking about budget priorities, to become more engaged. So I'm waiting to see where they're gonna go with that. So the concept is I'm told it's been, well, we have had joint meetings since I've been here. But, to have some joint public meetings, probably put them over at the high school, at the senior center. It might be very effective to get everyone on the same page more quickly on certain things. You'd still vote individually, you'd still have separate meetings. So this is just to take a look. If you have any thoughts or concerns or questions, let me know. At this point, just to put the bow on this, there'll be one additional potential meeting if the hall project continues on the path and it's approved for design specs and drawings and bidding in the fall. It's highly unlikely that it'll be ready for a full review by April. it would be ready by June, so it looks like the best answer would be to hold another special town meeting in June, either on the 11th or the 18th, and then pick it up then, on one topic.
I just gotta say off the top of my head, I'm concerned about that. That's a huge major project not being done at a full town meeting. I just throw that out for our reflection. I just seems to me, yeah, that.
We can try it. I mean, Hull did it for the windmill. They did a special town meeting for the windmill. That was a similar.
And you did it for the
large
schools.
project.
Cohasset did it for the
Yeah, they did it for schools. So ideally, yeah, if you can fit it in, it would be ideal for town meeting. It may be a tight fit.
The concern from the architects and the project managers is that just, you have to have enough time to do the designs, to put it out to bid, to give it sufficient time to pre-qualify people. There's this, and again, so they're coming next, the town hall committee is coming
Well,
next.
one of the things
week.
maybe we can discuss with them is how possible would it be for them to be able to make the May 1st, and it's impossible. We'll have to make what decisions we have to make. I mean,
Is it?
Or a second day.
Could we consider moving town meeting up?
Yeah, you could.
All of it?
The concern about that is that we've gotten into a habit with this.
Yep.
With the timetables we're on,
Right.
and it seemed to make more sense to keep it to that.
And June's crazy. One of those weekends is graduation, another is the arts festival, so that
There's,
just.
these are all on
Flush your
Mondays,
audience.
right, these are all on Mondays, right, so, there's no question that it's not the best.
Right.
But to rush it and not get
Right.
get this done is kind of fail.
So we have to
It's
see
kinda
where we
fail.
go.
So let's see
But
how
I
it
think you should
goes.
ask.
Yep.
You should.
Let's discuss
I
it.
mean, let's see how it goes. I mean, let's see how special town meeting goes, right?
So this is all just for conversation.
Great.
So that's
I
what.
think this is great, and, can we, when do you think we could lock this down and vote on this? I mean, I think we should,
You can at the next meeting, at least establish the dates without calling the meetings. Like I said, actually act,
well, these calendars, I think is what you're getting at.
yeah, because I think it helps everybody plan ahead of time.
We could vote on the calendar. It's a question whether the town meeting actually occurs at that time or town
Well, no,
election.
with chances are we may have the town meeting then, but it's a question, yeah. But we could change that though, right?
That's right.
Yeah, this is the first time we've actually, this is really early, right? But the good news is that it's really early, and it's good to, you're basically looking at almost the whole year. And this is not every single advisory.
No, but this is the way it should be.
Well,
done.
the other good thing about this is, as Troika goes into doing advisory and capital budget appointments, this is probably a valuable, tool.
Saying this way, do you get done?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of commitment it's gonna involve.
Yeah, because I think if you go back and reflect on what happened last budget cycle, we all did a good job, right? I think there was some confusion into the late spring, what the deadlines were, and I don't think there was clarity around when people had to have their jobs done. And if you do a calendar like this, nobody can say, and I'm talking about some of the committees, right? And nobody can say, geez, I didn't know I was supposed to be done by this date. I mean, you'll know. And that eliminates a lot of the ambiguity.
So one of the challenges is that some committees lock their dates up early, but statutorily, there's a 75-day look back for citizen petitions and Cohasset. So that date's gonna be in February if we're gonna have a meeting.
Right.
It's gonna move around.
So once that locks, we're locked.
Yeah, but so I wanna try to lock other things a little earlier.
Yeah.
But we can't really lock the warrant down in January. It's not possible under the system we have, so. So those are so think about it. We get a little, I would recommend we talk about this again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we might wanna incorporate CPC in here too.
Yeah, I tried to keep this to one page.
No, I got it, period.
But we could put, I want you to understand, this could be a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah, added.
There could be a lot, this could be, we have a this is just to keep it on one
Yeah,
page.
and I think Russ is gonna try to have a CPC meeting in July, so this is a good thing
Right.
for us to look at, to say, do we wanna, does CPC wanna set deadlines for applications?
Yeah,
that
I
kind of
think
thing.
that's a very good idea, particularly since everything does have to flow.
Right.
And the earlier that some of that work gets done, the better it is for everybody else, because,
Yeah.
if things back up at the end, it
Yeah.
becomes.
So, Mr. Chairman, maybe at the next meeting, we take a week to review, and then the next meeting, we say, we vote to work with this.
Yeah.
And, the first time around, we'll have a little bit of flexibility. If we have to change some dates, we change them. But I think this is a really good, strong start.
The specials are a much shorter calendar, obviously, it's not as much
Yeah.
to it, but the dates, that's gonna be the key, so.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is really good.
It is very late.
My dog is,
All right,
I
so
can hear her
if
barking.
you'd rather, I could give you updates on some of the positions for the next meeting. In the interim, before the next meeting, it's gonna throw off some of my deadlines, self-imposed deadlines, but that's okay. So, let me just have Lisa give you just a quick update on the finance director search, and then we're done, and then we'll update on the businesses.
Thank you. Right now, we are finalizing the job description. That's kind of the first main important thing. What will this position do? We are posting for a finance director, town accountant. And that job description's going through a couple different people that have input into that. So that'll get updated. From that job description, we will create a full job posting plus an online posting, 100-word short version of that. The job description is going to be completed this week, and the posting will follow within a day or two after that. So that's
Can we review that
Yeah,
before
absolutely.
it goes out?
Yeah.
Sure.
Is that, everybody
And
comfortable with
we'll
that?
have Lisa send it to all of you, and if you have any input, just send it back to her.
Sure.
Want to review the job description, or just the posting?
You send us the job description, we'll get it right back to you. I mean, is it something the selectmen should talk about in meeting what their expectations are for a finance director?
If you'd like to, that's fine. The goal here is to give you an idea of what the process
Why
is.
don't we look at that briefly at the next meeting? Could we put that on the agenda?
If we get the job descriptions, we promise we'll read them, and then we can,
We'll
take
put
a
5
few
to 10
minutes and
minutes
look
Do you
on
want
at
me to hold off on
Put
posting?
Put 5 to 10 minutes on.
She's planning on posting it, like,
Well, I
soon,
mean,
right?
Next week is the 4th of July week, right?
Right,
so nothing's
nothing's
gonna happen.
happening.
So if we have to wait a week, it's not gonna happen.
And we promise that we'll
Well,
finish
no, we'll look at it on the
11th.
11th.
On the 11th. and
It'll
then
be in
we'll
our
done.
package, we can,
Right.
I will have it ready.
because that way we can deliberate.
I will-
Deliberate on the 11th.
Right.
So that way, Jack, we can deliberate amongst ourselves as opposed to
And give us
sitting.
any-
I'd
that's
rather
fine.
us do it as a group.
But you'll get it in advance to chew on.
Alright, so
If you have any
that's-
questions, you're free to contact Lisa or myself.
Okay.
Our auditors also, Jim, I've asked you Paris for some
Yeah.
thoughts.
Could we do this on the finance thing, you have that on the agenda, but also have review of that and also a discussion of the process? Because I want to, early on, understand what the process is that's
So
going on.
let me run you through, because actually, so this is my job recruitment plan. I create this for the bigger positions. So, for recruiting materials, that's job description, that's creating the posting description and the job ad. So that's all the stuff that gets triggered off of the approval of the job description. So that all will kick off. I had them with June dates, but we'll update that to July 11th, and run from there. The next step is identifying the hiring selection criteria and the committee. For a position of this level, I recommend 2 levels of interviews and a hiring committee to kind of review all of that. So we have a hiring committee of Chris, Mary Gallagher, who's currently in the position, myself, and John Tuffy over at the schools, because he has some experience in this as well and some good connections. So that's a 4-person committee that just reviews kind of the hiring and the process and how it goes with input from you all. There will be 2 sessions of interviews. One will be to screen the first set of candidates, and then a group of finalists, maybe 2 or 3. I don't recommend more than that. We'll go through a second screening, and that will be Chris and various board members as recommended by you all.
What are we
So I
thinking about in
haven't
terms, can we
identified.
talk about salary in open meeting? I mean, what are we thinking about here?
We can't do that now.
No, we'll talk about ranges and stuff.
Are you willing to walk away? If you don't find a fit of serviceable nature, are you willing to walk away?
Oh, yeah.
Start it again.
Is Mary willing to stay?
Well, I don't think I was willing to stay, but we'll have to do something
Well,
else.
one thing I'm concerned, is I'd like to see, I mean, in the ideal world, the way that I've seen a major one like this done when we do the police thing, is that there was a considerable search and there was interviewing and viewing of them, and it narrowed down to 3 top people. I mean, that's what I want to be able to see.
Right, so that's
I mean,
this
I'm
whole
hoping- I want
hiring
these-
selection criteria and the committee that we're looking at. And then regarding what we were just talking about, regarding sourcing candidates, we will select all the posting locations, so there will be some standard locations on our website, MMA, but then there's some specifics to finance, municipal finance and accounting. And remember, this is kind of there's 2 roles incorporated into one. So the accountant piece is important on its own, because we need someone to do the accounting. And then the finance piece, we're looking for a certain kind of individual that can do what you want
The
them to do.
finance director.
Right, right.
Now, this is not something we want to use the consultant for to help get anybody's. I understand you just delineated a process, but do we wanna have a consultant?
I think while that may have some advantages, the problem that exists currently is that the fishing pond is not well stocked. It's not like there's a tremendous availability.
It's true, but if you had a consultant, that would be their knowledge area, and it would also be their mission to make sure if there was any legitimate viable candidates, they looked at them, that's all. Just throwing it out for our consideration.
If I may, follow up on that. So, one of the, getting subject matter people engaged is really important. There really aren't firms that specialize in this stuff for government side.
There isn't?
Searching for town managers, searching for police chiefs is an established industry.
Right.
There isn't anything like
There
that
isn't
for
for
this. That
finance.
doesn't mean you can't hire somebody, but we'd spend a lot of money that would, I think, basically replicate what we would do anyway. That said, I've reached out to Jim Powers and our auditing firm, who do work all over the state, and they're kind of that kind of subject matter, spreading the word out. Mary's made her intentions clear. She just finished her last mass government accountant session. People are talking, and the potential opening is out there. One of the goals that I've talked about with Lisa is to have her and John, identify some people out there who wanted to directly send this to, some people who are assistant finance directors on the places, people that we might know or hear of, and make sure it's getting pushed. And by the way, I have the same kind of recruitment from you folks or anyone else. If there's people that you want to specifically target it to, happy to do that. You're free to mention it. Hey, out there in the world, so that people will see it. It's going to be a very public ad, and very publicly out there, and it's going to target the people who will be looking. But I've also noticed an uptick, and I did this when we were doing IT, the search for IT. I injected myself as much as I could out in the field to see what was out there and let them know what's going on. So I've attended some GFOA meetings. I've been going out there to see what's out there and to get a better feel. And I've hired a number of controllers and finance directors in my past career too. So getting a fit here is really important. And I do want to clarify for you folks to what extent at the end. Obviously, we want to keep you brief throughout the entire process, but at one point, what role do you want to play? Do you want me to, again, I'm not asking for an answer, but one of the questions is, do you want me to present you some finalists in a public setting? Do you want to have some informal meetings? I mean, we're going to have some of that anyway. Anyone who comes in is going to be with department heads, and the advisory committee's got to play a role in this because they have a role in this hire the town accountant. But again, I'm not asking you to tell me now, but collectively, what do you want to do? And
Why don't we talk about that on the 11th, huh?
Boy,
That's
we're
why I
gonna be
said
here all
let's-
night on the
Let's
11th.
discuss
I just-
process as well.
it's such a strategic hire for us, like we've talked about before, that I think, you're gonna have to bear with us a little bit while we kind of,
Yeah.
because I think it's a really important hire.
It's an important hire. I think it's the most important hire, one of the most important hires that I have to make.
Yes.
Again, the chiefs are very unique positions. I live with this person. I live with every day. They're
Yeah,
a
you
partner.
need
They're a
a
partner.
good, strong
in everything you do.
person.
I've been very fortunate to have hired some really good people, but wasn't easy to get to them all the time. The first search, 13 years ago, in North Hempstead, was brutal. The candidate pool was this deep, and we finally found somebody. I found it through a friend. I made a phone call. He found somebody who was an experienced accountant who happened to be in an unusual circumstance. So I'm happy to have all of you act as recruiters as well. I mean, we want to make sure that the pool's out there, the pool is wide. Because somebody from the private sector, I'd like them to have some municipal understanding, because the accounting is very different on this side. Some very large communities, Lexington is an example, recently went into the private sector to hire people because they couldn't find people who had government experience. They had to train them. I mean, that wouldn't be perfect, but from the short term. But it could be far better in the long term if you have the right candidate, because you can find someone who can really learn this stuff. I'd rather have a CPA. My past experience, Mary's great, but a CPA has just a different level of skills built in.
More strategic way of looking at things.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to say that, because that's not true about Mary at all, but I would not shy away from looking at a private sector person if we can't find a public sector person.
No. And by the way, I have no problem with interviewing both. In fact, I encourage candidates from the private sector to apply, and we just have to have a structured. One of the other challenges is getting structured training, because other people in other communities are discovering, well, how do we train people on this stuff? We can't do it ourselves. So,
I just want to say Jim Powers is a very talented, I respect his abilities.
and I asked him months ago, I said, Jim, I'm gonna have this hire, Mary's gonna retire at the end of the year. If you can identify some folks out there, one of the best hires I had as a deputy controller, I stole from my accounting, from my auditing firm. My auditor didn't talk to me for a while, but she was phenomenal. She had audited books for dozens of municipalities. She came in, she was cracker, she was super smart, and had done it all before. I'd seen other communities, which is even better. She wasn't in a silo.
Great.
And now she's the controller of a city in New York, going through all kinds of crazies. But she's doing great work. So if I'd love to have somebody from the private sector with that kind of private sector in town. Paul is mostly a private sector person too. So, but that's go ahead.
I just bring up two points. The first is everything you mentioned is really important. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is that right now we're looking at an October retirement date for Mary.
Okay, so we have a hustle.
That time crunch is really happening. The second thing is Mary marks the start of a series of potential retirements that we're looking at. So succession planning is, I know you're sick of hearing it from me, but it's so important because there's some people in key critical positions that in the next couple of years you're going to start seeing.
So can we get an update on that? I mean, that's part of the optimization of the org structure and that the goal we had, right?
After our meeting the other day, the goal setting,
Fire chief next.
Lisa and I'm sorry, I've been getting up at 6 o'clock, not quite as early as you, but my brain starts to turn to mud now at 10:30. I just did a whole reorg on the things that we already done and the things I want to move, and I think we're gonna make some moves, some just based on circumstance, that'll get us closer to where we want to be, and we'll talk about that over the summer.
Really quickly, do you anticipate crossover with Mary?
I'm hoping, honestly, I would recommend it.
That's the optimal.
She's not adverse. It's not like she's leaving town on the day she retires.
She lives in Situate, right?
Yeah. I expect that she'll probably head off to Florida at some point, not too far after, but she's absolutely willing to work in a training situation.
I bet it's an aside for everybody else is here. This is this organization is not unlike a small private business in that key positions leave big voids because there's generally very little bench depth, and that exists here as well.
Especially with very small staff.
That's my point.
Yeah.
So it's not just a matter of making the heroic hire to replace someone who's retiring, because sometimes you just don't hit it out of the park. But it's also a longer-term plan to start to train up those that are underneath. I mean, I had a boss once, I remember this, I will till the day I die. He said, never become indispensable, because if you do, you can't be promoted. And it made a lot of sense. His point, though, was make the people underneath you, or bring the people underneath you up, so that they can take your job. Because without that, you're never moving up. So.
Well, that's all part of the program that Lisa's unveiling and the training protocol that we're putting into effect on July 1. There is a challenge of being as small as we are. It's not like you have a deputy in every department.
Right.
That said, you gotta do,
There are
do what you can.
opportunities.
And, so that's a quick update. Anything else that you want to ask at this point? We'll follow up more. We'll talk about HR probably a little bit at every meeting for the next couple of months.
Payroll's going good? New payroll?
Yeah, as far as I know, there was a.
Do we cover any phantom employees?
No, fortunately,
Vacations to Bermuda?
No, there was a skip. The system accidentally, because people.
Oh my God, that's one of the reasons there's such a great cardio.
The system tried to double pay people for Memorial Day, that got caught. Because some people put in, it's holiday hours, and it was reading them, and it was automatically giving.
But it was caught.
It was caught. It got fixed. So, so you gotta watch these little. You gotta watch these little systems. So,
One quick thing on training. Thank you for that link. I let you know that I did actually register for the webinar on July 11th at 9:30 to 11. It's going to be a webinar. I'm going to have it here on open meeting law, and this is offered by the Attorney General's office.
Fabulous.
Excellent.
Who's that gonna be open to now? Is that
anyone?
That is open
So are we
to all
promoting that?
staff and
Because-
committee members.
And we're gonna most certainly committee members know.
Send it all to committee members, yeah. Good. Very good.
Yes, for review the minutes of 6/13/2017. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Good. I have no topics reasonably anticipated by the chairman 48 hours in advance.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.